the moment I mentioned your name, she just like turned and then like acted super cold, and then I backed up. But
I think it was mostly.
Holy shit, that's the end of the story.
That's
the
it.
story is
Wow.
literally Loco was somewhere, and then he saw someone that used to be your girlfriend, and he goes, hey, I think you used to be that guy's girlfriend. And then she just sort of thought, well, I don't really know who the fuck you are, some person who used to know my ex, and so actually I'll just go about my life. This is awkward. Loco's got this straight fire. I can't wait to tell the guys. The stream's going to fucking love this. It's not even any punchline. Right, this is going to be episode 12 of Listen Loco, because we've had 11 episodes before. This is a new one. Keep up. It's going to be like that the whole show. We're not going to be slowing down with sort of any annotations for anyone. So obviously me and Loco are back, because that's basically the whole point of the show. But our guest for this one is Loco again, reaching deep, probably overreaching his actual grasp in the scene, because he's got ACHILIO'S, right, who you will all know, obviously, for his time as a commentator of the LCK. He's also actually done some Overwatch tournaments as well, for anyone who doesn't know, when OGM was branching out into that. So he's done a bit of the Apex, etc. But let's start here. The reason why I made that sort of jab there, that Loco might be overreaching here, is because I'm actually going to go ahead and guess. Let's see at the beginning here.
okay.
Does Loco know what type of a caster ACHILIO'S is? How do you characterize him as a caster?
Play-by-play, right?
Yeah, play-by-play.
Oh.
So here's the question for you, Loco.
Okay.
What sort of things did you think a play-by-play caster would talk with us on this show about?
Well, I asked Seth about whatchamacallit, Kespa Cup, if he's going to watch Kespa Cup, because I wanted to talk about Kespa Cup. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Kespa Cup, a little bit about history of Seth, how he got started in esports, working in TL, and then going over to Korea, and like Korean culture, and like being a foreigner in Korea. So those were like the kind of topics I had in mind.
Right. So we're focusing mainly on him, not the region as much yet.
Well, we talked
Sounds fine to me.
we talked about the region a lot with Ashley. So with Seth,
Sure.
I thought we could do something a little bit different, and I think a lot of
Yes.
our fan base is from America or from Europe, and they haven't lived in Korea before. And I think living in a foreign country as like a foreigner, especially Korea, where the culture is so different, would be a very interesting episode. And we can talk about everything league related.
Sure.
And
yeah.
you hate my
you see how he
topic
did
list.
that there? You see how he did that there, though, Seth? Like, he didn't say, like, you know, I've been following the Kespa Cup very closely, so I wanted to talk with him. He was like, I asked him if he would watch the Kespa Cup.
I watched Kespa Cup!
Now he can tell us what the Kespa Cup is all about, you know, like.
Oh my god. Why are you so mean to me, Doran? Like, honestly.
Listen, that's how I break the ice. I have to get people going, you know. It's called a state break. What I have to do is bring you out of whatever state you're in before, get you excited, get you jumping up and down in your chair, get your hair flicking back and forth.
Who hurt you? Who hurt you? Was it Monty? Was it Riot? Was it ESL? Was it Carmack? Like, who hurt you, Doran? Why are you like this?
Everyone and no one.
Yeah.
And maybe no one enough. Maybe that
Okay.
was the real problem, right?
Yeah.
It
So
definitely
anyway,
wasn't Carmack.
no, exactly. So let's start things off like this then. So I actually want to know, how did you get the gig in OGN? Because like Loco says, you were working with Team Liquid, etc. And I actually think I even met you once when I was in LA, and I was there doing something with. I was working with Damien at the time for some like feature for Cloud9. But here's the thing: like at the time, you weren't like a person I knew particularly for like your alias or whatever. You weren't like a front-facing person really. So how do you go from that to commentator in one of the best leagues in the world?
So it was actually we met in London for Worlds 2015 during
Right, that would make sense.
quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals.
Yeah, so that was under the quarterfinals. So that's when we met. Actually, the first thing that I did when I got picked up to do Team Liquid's video work was to clean up your audio, because Damien had only run like one mic.
Impossible task, right? Because they fucked that up big time.
And, yeah, it was one mic for the interviews with you and all the Cloud9 players or something like that, and it was completely fucked. And that was the first thing that I got tasked with when I got there, and I did the best job that I possibly could have done.
Wow.
And it was rough. But so initially, I met Damien Estrada in 2014. That bled into...
Who's Damien? People don't know who Damien is. Could you explain that?
Damien Estrada is the primary filmmaker for One Up Studios under Team Liquid, started under Team Liquid, and before that was with the Zubu.
So, for example, he was behind Breaking Point and, you know, a bunch of the things people have seen, the reality shows.
Yeah. And then Rhodes way before with like CLG and everything like that. I believe it was when he was still with the Zubu. So I met him when I just went out as a fan to see the LCS. I just happened to go there because I had some money to spend, some time off. So I went out for the final Super Week in 2014. Met Damian Estrada. We became good friends. I told him that I had a filmmaking background, and basically he got picked up by Team Liquid when they had the merger. Thankfully, they did not become Team Quest because that would have been a fucking catastrophic nightmare. But Team Liquid happened. They hired Damian. They wanted to expand their video team after a little while. He was working for a couple months by himself, during the spring split of 2015. So I was the first person that he asked, to my knowledge at least. But so he asked me to come out there. I started working with him. 9 months later, after I've been casting since 2012. I went out during August of 2015. I got flown out to Taiwan by Twitch to do the LMS regional and summer finals.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And then flash forward to almost 9 months later, I got the opportunity to go with Cloud9. They kind of Team Liquid kind of leased me out. We sold the video package to Cloud9 to follow them through their Worlds run, because TL famously didn't make it until this year. So I got the opportunity to go out and to their boot camp, fill them in Korea when they were staying in Gangnam, and then follow them to Paris, which is where it all inevitably ended. They didn't make it to London. But during that time, I met Monte Cristo while I was in Paris, and he actually had seen my cast of the LMS, and he was, you said oh yeah, I've seen that. You're actually pretty good. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And basically, when it came time for OGN to expand, it was Monte Cristo, Doa, Papa Smithy. They wanted another play-by-play. He had reached out to me and was like, what would you think about moving to Korea and living here at casting? And I remember specifically I was out at a bar in Santa Monica on Sawtell Boulevard called Karaoke Blue.
Oh, I know that one.
And yeah, it's a spot that a lot of people go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there by myself. I just wanted a night to just go out to a bar, have some drinks, maybe get drunk and sing a couple songs, whatever, have a good time. And while I was there, I got this DM from Monty on Twitter, and I instantly said, yes, absolutely. And, within the next few days, it was me telling people at Team Liquid, hey, I'm going to leave. You need to find another video guy because I'm going to move to fucking Korea. That was very long-winded, but that's the gist of it.
Sure, they could have definitely been a lot shorter. What about this then? When you were actually in LA and you were working with Team Liquid, did you actually know Loco at that point in time?
Yeah.
Yes, Loco and I worked together. So I met Loco before when he was still with TSM as his hoodie shows, on Santa Monica Pier or something like that, or a fucking arcade or something. I don't know. But
okay, I do remember.
We hung out for a little bit. Yeah, and then we ended up at Bubba Gumps or some shit. I don't know. But
it was with Joka Steve, right?
Yeah, it was with a bunch of people, and then so we met and we hung out that evening, and then Loco obviously had his inevitable transition into Team Liquid, where he had his fantastic show that we produced for him.
Yeah, those are actually doing really well on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm not crazy. I'm just Loco and all that nonsense. So, and. Yeah, so we were making his videos for him, filming him, editing, and all that kind of stuff. So we worked very closely together, and then as I was moving into OGN, Loco started becoming the coach of TL at that time.
Fair enough. Okay. What's it been like, though, being in Korea, in as much as, one thing that I found must have been interesting was, when I first went to Korea, it was just Monty and Doa, and then I think Papa Smithy came, towards the end of when I was there, and, they gradually added more people. If people remember, they used to do every single game on the English broadcast. Yeah. And it's not just that more people have come now, but obviously it was actually been a whole cycle of people. And then you add in the Spore period when you had LS and you had Crumbs, you had all these different people coming over. Has it been different in that sense? Because before it was kind of a crew, and everyone knew each other, and it was kind of it was fairly static to some degree.
I mean, it's still very similar. I mean, as far as the English commentators go in Korea, we all still are very tight knit. There's maybe 10 to 12, I think, at this point. There's a couple of people who have transitioned from being, English teachers where they were living here before, and then now they've started commentating games like PUBG and Clash Royale and stuff like that. So not the more premier titles, but titles that are building up, and obviously PUBG is a very big game in Korea. It's been top of the PC bongs for a while, like, or in the top 3 for a very long time. But they've made that transition. But even still, it's a very small, tight-knit group, and we stay very connected with each other. Just this past Sunday, we were all at Artosis's house for a Christmas party and everything like that. We had all of the English commentators basically under one roof, and we're hanging out and whatnot, and we all have a group chat and we communicate with each other.
And of course, to tithe 10% of your earnings and bend and kiss the ring, so you would be, permitted to again work for another year within the Korean scene without your career being brutally ended by some unknown, nondescript hired goons who would scream, "Those are my ladder points," while ejecting you from one of those cabs that has that weird lion thing on that Soul thinks is a sick fantasy animal.
But that's
whatever that company's called.
What you described regarding like foreigners being in Korea, it's really, really common. Even with like English teachers or like other like foreigners that go to Korea, like I guess like military people, they usually stay very, very tight knit, and it's very hard to be, I guess, good friends with Koreans and like get into like a Korean circle of friends. And most foreigners that I know stay in their own circles.
Of course. Yeah.
Yes, but I think that if that's just how people act, then they're just kind of being stupid, because so many of the friends that I've made that are actually like Korean, I've made because I just I try to learn the culture, and I try to speak Korean as much as possible. Like, my Korean's very weak overall. Conversationally, it's just I can understand more than I can speak, but most of the friends that I've made who are Korean, they just like me because I respect them as they would be respected in Korean culture. So, if they're my hyung, I don't necessarily call them my hyung, but I treat them the same way that somebody would their hyung, that kind of thing. And they find that very appreciative. It's the same thing with people who operate businesses out here. If you say "chuseo," if you speak the language or you make an effort to respect the culture, then they will very much reciprocate that back to you as a respected customer, and then you can form a foundation for a relationship. Well, so I feel like I've heard from so many business owners that they're like, "Wow, you're not like all of the other foreigners out here." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Oh, they just say like, 'Give me a beer.'"
Yeah.
They don't say please. They don't even say please in English. Like they just encounter dickheads basically. And when you're living in a foreign country, you can't just keep doing the same shit that you did back home. Like, you're in somebody else's house, basically. Like, you have to adhere to their rules, and that's the culture.
I mean, kudos to you. Like, that's something not a lot of foreigners do. That's not something a lot of casters do. That's not something a lot of the players that go over do, and just foreigners in general that go over to Korea do. Dorian sure as hell didn't. Dorian talked about flaunting his Korean girlfriend in front of older Korean...
In front of racist people, yes. I don't unsurprisingly actually, believe in the etiquette of, doing what racist people want actually local. I know you think that's crazy, obviously.
I just think you're really, I guess, rough around the edges, and you get a kick out of rustling feathers, and it seems...
Depends who it is, local. Here's the thing. Here's the genius of being a foreigner in Korea. This is what no one tells you, is that by default, especially if you don't speak Korean, people won't expect you to know the etiquette and politeness, etc. So as Seth is saying here, if you actually show that you do, which means you've put in some effort to at least find it out and remember it and know when to apply it, they will actually be very appreciative, and they will generally treat you a little bit nicer as a result. So what you do, here's the secret, is whenever it's something you think is just bullshit, just don't do it and pretend you don't know and do whatever the fuck you wanted. But then every now and then, when it actually has a positive quality, do it then, and then you get even more props. So I'll give you an example. As you just said there, if you're in a Korean barbecue or something, I'll give you an example. Okay, in English culture, we have a very bizarre culture in restaurants, right, where you don't ever call the waiter to your table.
Really?
You're supposed to sit silently, politely, and the idea is it's his job to know, who he's supposed to go and see. And so the logic is, either he comes by every 20 minutes to sort of check that you're doing okay, or if he hasn't come and brought you a menu or something, you wait, and the notion is, right, well, he must know, I've come and sat down, so, he'll come once he's finished with other people. So actually, in England, you would never be like, hey, mate, generally you wouldn't do that. So people I know who go to certain other countries, like a good example actually would be like the Netherlands at the moment. In the Netherlands, you're supposed to sort of get people's attention and be like, hey, all right, mate, hey, come and see me now, and then they know that you want to be served. So if British people go to these countries, they inevitably get really frustrated and think they're being insulted, right? Because they're like, what the hell? I was sat here for like 10 minutes and no one came and took my order and stuff. Well, here's the genius thing I learned is in Korea, especially in Korean barbecues, famously, not only do they have the bell that you can press, but fuck the bell. If there's no bell, you just shout out like, yo, you just scream at them, right? Yeah, which means like, attention, hey, you, like, here. And so what's great is you just do that, and they're like you're literally like your personal robot that just brings you stuff. Like anytime you want anything whatsoever, you just shout out like that, even if they're talking to someone else, like as they're going by. Also, all you have to do is you don't just say the thing as you say, you just like, just you, and then they're like, oh, which means like, give me this. So all you need to know is like, you, and like, give me this. They bring you all the shit. You get it all, and then later on the other stuff, you just do whatever the fuck you want. They can't say like, oh, you know about this? I don't know shit, mate. I don't need to. Why? I'm just a foreigner. I'm just a little white boy lost in Korea. Please help me out.
There.
And give me that fucking Korean barbecue now.
That's Logan Paul-esque.
Is it?
No.
Well, to be fair, this show's fucking Logan Paul-esque because I sit here trying to make entertainment while a fucking corpse from League of Legends is on the other side of the screen.
Wow.
There you go.
Okay,
but you know what? Chance would be a fine thing, Local. There we go. Straight fire. Keep going. Right, back into the show. What about this then? What is the best thing about living in Korea, Seth?
Oh God, there's so many things. I mean, honestly, like, one of the.
Don't say the woman.
Living. No. What? Well, I mean, well, I love my girlfriend, but you know, I like. There's so many things.
Wait,
living in
wait,
LA.
I have to interject. I have to say a story. Oh my God, it's. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Seth. So.
It's about some redheaded girl.
No. It's about one of. It's not something weird. So it's just one of your exes. Okay. So.
Oh no.
There's a girl that Seth used to date on TL.
Oh, I don't want the story.
Oh, no, it's just super random. It's just super random. Okay, so about like a year back, I was at a gas station with a friend, and I was helping my friend fill up the gas, and then the person next to me, like the car across, is like staring at me, like this like shortish like Asian girl is like just staring at me weird, and I was like, oh, does she recognize me? Maybe she wants a photo. So I walk up to her and say hi and like, hey, and then she's like, and then she suddenly like, it's like, she's like deer in the head, like look at me, and she's like, I was like, hi, like, and then she's like, do I know you? I was like, oh, you were staring at me, and then she's like, oh, I thought I saw you from somewhere, and then like all of a sudden, it clicked. I was like, oh wait, I know you, you're Seth's girlfriend, and then she's like, oh, we broke up. I was like, oh, and then she just like wanted to cut the conversation really short, and then she like just turns around, like goes to like the gas, like it's like filling up, like she's has nothing to do. She just, the moment I mentioned your name, she just like turned and then like acted super cold, and then I backed up. But
I think it was mostly.
Holy shit, that's the end of the story. The story is literally Loco was somewhere, and then he saw someone that used to be your girlfriend, and he goes, hey, I think you used to be that guy's girlfriend. And then she just sort of thought, well, I don't really know who the fuck you are, some person who used to know my ex, and so actually I'll just go about my life. This is awkward. Loco's got this straight fire. I can't wait to tell the guys. The stream's gonna fucking love this. It's not even any punchline.
It's not even because like he mentioned me. It's because while I was dating that girl, she's very much just didn't like you and stuff. So that's just all.
What?
Right.
I never even interacted with her. That was like my first interaction with her.
Exactly. What happened is when she used to date, he'd be watching.
Once was enough.
I was super polite.
When she used to date Seth, he used to be watching the LCS because you know what, he has to pretend to actually give a fuck about Western people who play the game still, because one day he might need that little pivot to the LCS if he can. But when he used to watch, right, his girlfriend used to go, who is that guy? That skinny guy behind TSM? He goes, oh, don't worry about that. He's just some washed up fuck who like they let do it or something like. He just knows Korean and they can't be bothered to hire a translator at the moment. And then she was like, wow, I hate him. And then Seth was like, nah, he's all right. You know, I know him from Team Liquid and that. But then what happened is when Seth left her, then she was like, right, now I'm on chain, so fuck that guy. Get out. And then she did that Drake meme like that on you. Straight fucking dissed you, put gas in her car, went on.
All right, I'll get back to your question before Loco has.
Anyway, Seth, have you ever met any of Loco's exes, and did they ever?
Oh my God, no! Please, no! No, I don't
Yes,
have any.
I have.
I don't have any ex-girlfriends. I just get friend zoned. I've never had a girlfriend. Please, let's not go there. Let's not go there.
There we go. Don't crack his persona.
Yes, I have, but I'll go back to your question to spare him the embarrassment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Insurmountable. So one of the best things I guess about living in Korea, like aside from the cost of living, because that's a huge thing. That's what I was kind of gonna say. Like going from LA, where to be fair, like my apartment was paid for. I was living with Team Liquid, but just knowing the cost of living while I was there, and then coming here was just fucking insane. The transition, but honestly, the food and the people, a combination of both. You can get pretty much any food that you want in Korea, even if it's a Western style, if it's a Western food, like you can still find a very good restaurant for it. And the people are so kind, and that goes back to what I was saying about just kind of embracing the culture and integrating yourself in it. Like I said, like if you show an effort, the people are so kind here. Every now and then, you get hit with like a teensy tiny bit of racism, but the only thing that I've encountered in that regard is just a cab driver won't pick me up.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's the famous one, isn't it? Like if you're a night out, they just won't pick you up if you're a white dude.
But that's it, and that's the most amazing thing is that is it. I've never encountered anything else as far as racism goes in Korea. It's just a cab driver like slowly pulls up, and then he sees I'm white, and he's just like, no, fuck it. Like he probably doesn't speak Korean.
By the way,
but
even that one has like.
If he stopped, I would tell him where to go in Korean, and then he would probably be like, "Oh, this is so bad," but he's just not willing to give that chance.
No, but here's the thing: even that one isn't as bad as it sounds on the surface, because people are thinking they're just pure racists. No, in that scenario, most of the time, it's like say you're in like Hongdae or somewhere where there's a lot of bars and there's going to be some foreigners and students and stuff. They don't want to pick someone up who might not speak Korean and might be drunk and might just throw up in the back of their cab because like they're never getting it. You're never gonna fucking pay them, especially if you're some like GI or student. You're just gonna fuck off the second you're out of the cab. So I don't even blame them for that one. In fact, that's the one that my Korean girlfriend taught me the way you get around that. What you do is this. You know when you go up to the cab, the guy wants you to roll the window down and talk to him, right, and tell him where you're going. What you do instead, she told me this, is you just get in the back of the car.
And then you close
the door. Get in the car.
Yeah, because then it's like so much harder for him to kick you out at that point in time. Like, odds are he's going to take you.
If you get in the car and then if he refuses to take you, you just snap a picture with the flash on. So every time I go out, I make sure I have my on my camera just in case this happens, and you snap a picture because every taxi driver,
their ID.
Basically around the world, they have their ID mounted on the passenger side visor. You snap a picture of that, they'll take you wherever the fuck you want to go. That guy would be like, okay, fine, fuck it, where do you want to go? And I could be like, drive me to Busan.
So a famous thing,
and he would have to basically do it.
So a famous thing in Korea is a lot of the cab drivers will even refuse Koreans due to certain hours. It's really beneficial to be in the middle of the city, and late hours they want to go towards their home, and it's illegal for them to deny you once you're in the car. But once you're out of the car, they can deny you, and they can say, he never even got in the car. So once you're actually in the car, it's illegal for them to kick you out, and by taking a picture, like, you can report them. That's why, like, but once you're actually in the car, legally they can't kick you.
Like, probably the weirdest part is, like, in line with what you just said there about where they want to be in a certain part of the city, because, for example, if like a nightclub, people are leaving, they want to get their gig there. One of the other things, famously, they will wreck you with is, say you have been drinking and you don't want to walk like two train stops home when there's no train running in, because, that it might still be cold. That might still be like, like 2 kilometer walk or something.
Here.
Like, in that scenario, to the cab driver, it's not a very far drive. So sometimes they just won't take you because it's not far enough. Now, that's an alien concept in the West, because they'll just take you no matter what. If you just get in the cab and say, can I go here? They go, yeah, don't they? Because whatever fee they make, they've figured out the amount for that. So, again, it's one of those things where technically they're not supposed to do it. But the point there is, like, they've really found the perfect victim, haven't they? If you don't speak any Korean and you barely know Korean culture, like, you're not going to start reading the Riot Act to the guy and say, well, subsection 4 of the... Like, you don't know shit about that. You just think, oh, okay, I'll ask the next person, and then they're all just telling you to go fucking ask the next cab driver. What about this, though? When you said that, though, Seth, one thing I've got to pull you up on is I agree. If you know every place in Seoul, you can find every type of food. You can find some guy who's like from Mexico and makes really good tacos, right? But there is a type of Korean food that is whack as fuck, which is when they try to make Western dishes, but they like force it through the prism of their ingredients. Like they have it at Seoul Airport. In Incheon, when you go to one of those like restaurants beyond the gates where you're inside the actual airport, they have one of them there where if you go there, they have all these Western dishes listed. But when you see it, it still comes as like a bowl of rice, and the egg is still like the weird egg that's on. It's like every item is technically what they said, like a pork cutlet with like veggies or something. But it's so fucked up. It's like when you see it, you're like, did an alien make this out of me just describing the ingredients to him?
That's just trial and error for a lot of restaurants. Unfortunately, like there are restaurant groups in Korea, like on Facebook and stuff like that, where they're just like, yeah, like I went to this place, it just opened up, go try it, it's amazing. And then you can decide whether or not you want to do it. I'm not a part of that group, and the one that the person I defer to is actually Pop Smith. Okay. He's a big I don't know if he self-identifies as like a foodie, but like
used to at least.
Oh my god.
I don't give a fuck. He knows it's true. He made the choice, mate. It's not like he was born like that. He made the choice to put 17 fucking hamburgers in there.
Look.
Keep going. Don't let it rattle you.
I'm just saying, props to him on a side note.
Exactly.
Because good God, I'd fuck him. But like
who's a bear?
He's the one who you know you go to basically to figure out like a good restaurant, everything like that.
Yes.
And you will always be able to find something that is good and that is pretty authentic. There's obviously always going to be those really poor imitations and stuff like that, but for the most part, it can be very region specific in Seoul. Hongdae is a fantastic spot if you're gonna try to get multicultural food and all that kind of stuff. But
Hongdae, Taiwan.
Yeah, you can always find really good food.
Oh,
I used to live around Hongdae. My area now is very Korean. My girlfriend and I moved in together. It is extremely fucking Korean. And even finding like Chinese food like yangkochi or something like that, like lamb skewers, is very difficult. It's mostly just barbecue and hofs, which is just chimek straight up. But like even where I live, there's still good sushi places. There's still good ramen, stuff like that.
So one thing I do want to touch on, racism in Korea, like something you guys mentioned. So I actually think it's a hugely different concept in Korea, because growing up in America, like you meet black people, you meet Latino people, you meet Pacific Islanders, like you just meet and grow up around people of different races and people of different cultures. In Korea, that's not the case. Like 99.9% of the people you meet are going to be Korean. So you're not really taught about other races like existing and like getting along with other races. Like you see them on TV, and then like you'll see them on the streets, and then like when you see like a person of a different color in Korea, it's like, oh my god, like look, like that person looks really different, because you didn't grow up around those people. So it's very common for like people to like, especially younger kids, to like point, and like parents to be like, no, you don't.
I had a great one like that when I first went to China. This would be about like probably almost 10 years ago now. I went to China for a CS event, and I wasn't going somewhere big. I actually went to Hangzhou, which isn't like a super great place. In fact, the only reason we were going there is because I think like the city itself like offered the arena, which is a dog shit old basketball stadium, like for free to the event if we went there, because they were trying to spin it on the angle of like it will bring tourism, which is like you were easily 10 years too early on that one, mate. Like nobody's going to this event on holiday just to see like the fucking this random CS event. But anyway, when we went there, because as I say, it wasn't Shanghai, it wasn't like Beijing, it wasn't some big city where they might have seen foreigners. I also, everyone look this up. Go and look up some old pictures of how I used to look. I've got one on my Instagram where I'm wearing like a Steelers jersey, because I didn't have a beard, I didn't have this look back then, but I had like quite long hair because I just didn't give a fuck. I just let it go completely because I wasn't on camera for any reason. Everything I did was like writing articles, so I didn't need to look good or whatever, right? And so one of the things I did was I was just walking around the town trying to get like a feel for, what's China like, because I'd never been there before. So I was going to different food places. I was just on my own, I didn't have like a Chinese person because I was only on the main roads, I was never going to get lost. And as I would walk by, I'm not joking, at least 5 times, I would have little children, like, like a 6-year-old kid who would just literally point like that, and then the mother would literally I've even seen a mother do it, where I saw a mother lean down to a little kid, point at me, and start telling this kid something in Chinese, because she was probably just going like, holy shit, look at that fucking white boy over there, look at that hair, look at that fucking afro motherfucker, like they're like a full white afro. It was insane.
They're like, no, that's Doran, that's the East Force historian, kid, look, get a signature. That's what they were doing.
She was like, he knows it. Like,
she was like, son, remember when I took that trip to the UK for an esports event 3 years ago? That's how I met your father. There we go.
So, I have had an experience like this, and it was actually it was a Chinese couple, and it was when I first got out here. Me, Susie, and Monty, which is fine now because I can actually speak about them being a fucking couple finally after all these years.
Yeah.
Is Susie, Monty, myself, and then Robin, who is now the general manager or one of the he's like the team manager.
Translator, Overwatch.
He used to be the translator for OGN, otherwise known as George. He's the manager for London Spitfire in Overwatch League. We went snowboarding in Pyeongchang, which is where the Olympics were, and I stopped on the side. There was like a little bench that was built on the side of the mountain. And I just stopped and decided to sit there because I was waiting for Susie and Monty to come down. And this Chinese couple came down. They were older, maybe like 50, 60, something like that. Like they're pretty elderly. And they stopped, and the woman just like suddenly pointed at her phone and like pointed at me. And I thought they wanted me to take a picture of them. And I'm like, yeah, of course. And then they both like get right next to me on this bench and then hold up the camera to take a selfie. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And they just wanted a picture because it's like, oh, this is a white guy.
No.
Like,
I'll actually explain you to this one. I'll give a new understanding of your own story. So, you know how people say, oh, all Asians look the same. Like, I can't tell the difference between Chinese, Korean, and also like between like Asian people.
Bullshit.
How do you tell the difference?
No, he's about to make a point now that I know what it is. But go on ahead, Loco. Go on, give it the theory.
The reverse is true, where if you are Asian, sometimes you have hard time telling apart white people. I'm not even like, this is a legitimate thing. Like, people of the same culture can tell each other apart. They probably thought you were some famous white guy. So when I hang out with my other foreigner friends back in Korea, people will come up to them and seem like, oh, they recognize it. Especially with black people. There's this guy named Sam Witwicky. Oh, what's his name? There's like really famous black person in Korea, and people, whenever I hung out with my black friend in Korea, people would go up and ask, oh, are you Sam? And they're like, no, he's not Sam. He just looks similar. But it happens all the time in Korea where Koreans can't tell apart white people and especially black people. And they think, oh, that black person, that's Sam. I saw him on TV.
Because you have to think about it, like, there's two angles that are very obvious here. One is these are people who haven't seen loads of white people, haven't been around white people, etc. So they don't know, like, the key subtle differences. Like, the difference is, if I look at you, I see not only all the little differences, but I see, like, the big overarching, like, qualities of your person that I would remember vividly, right? If I just saw you randomly and I saw another guy about 5 minutes later who had glasses on and a hood, I could easily, even myself could mistake that was the same person. Oh, was that the same guy, you know? Unless you know the person intimately. And then more importantly than that, you have to add in, like, there's the angle that your brain purposely looks for patterns whenever it's looking at things. So as a result, everyone's probably, I'll give you a great example everyone knows, is if you've ever had like a serious relationship with someone and then it ends really badly, it's a famous phenomenon where you actually will literally in your brain see their face in crowds when you're walking around. Like,
is that what happened? Like, when what is it? I flamed you when I was on TSM. You saw me everywhere. Me and Andy, everywhere you went. Every Asian person you saw was either me or Andy.
I guess it wasn't bad. I'll just leave that one as it is. We'll give him this one, shall we? Right. So anyway, to be fair, mate, there's not a lot of Asians look like you. I mean, if we start off, a lot of them like dress like men and have masculine features. So, you know, I mean, there is that. You wanted it, mate. You asked for this smoke, you get this. Anyway, not
everyone. I am the top 10%. Not everyone's as good looking as me. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what
I'm so glad I did this show.
So no, one of the things is though, like, when you go around, you will see, you won't take much if you just see someone who has the same haircut, right, and they've turned around. Your brain, as they turn, will make you like transpose onto them just for a split second, that person's face, and then you'll even sort of snap out of it instantly and go, oh, that isn't them. Why am I thinking that? But it's because your brain just looks for that pattern. So unfortunately, in your case, it's a very good one because you give the example of like a famous person. So the idea there is they don't know any black people. So they see a black person, their brain goes, wait a minute, I know a guy and he's in Seoul right now. Could this be him? And then they can't remember exactly what he looked like. So they do it that. But the reason why I think it's a good point to bring up, Loco, is because since people are so hypersensitive now in the West, people genuinely think that's like really bad racism. Because, for example, okay, I'll give you a great example. In CSGO, the team that won the major earlier this year, the North American team, Cloud9, had 2 Asian players on there. I think they're both ethnically Chinese and automatic with the
3 automatic.
Right, so these 2 players are both Asian, and they don't really look alike, quite frankly. You know, like they're not particularly similar. But there have been event organizers that accidentally put like the wrong names on them, right? Which probably is just a guy who doesn't know CS and he just works like, he does generic esports stuff for them, and he's Googled and he's just got them mixed up, And people would always literally say like, wow, that's so racist. It's like, is it though? Oh, isn't it just an honest mistake, Is it that? Like, I would call really bad racism like actually discriminating against someone, like bullying them, making them feel like you're not doing any of that. It's just a simple honest mistake, isn't it? Because you don't know them.
I'll tell you a hilarious one. So when Riot does makeup, right? They have a sheet of all the players' faces, and they check them off as they do makeup. I forgot what international event this was, but one of the Riot makeup artists, after I was done with makeup, she was like, "Which one did I do? Like, which one was it?" And then because she didn't know who it was. I think it was with Rox, and she didn't know whose makeup she did, and she needed to check them off so she can ask for the next one. And I was like, "Oh, you did Gorillas. That was just Gorillas." And she's not even being racist. She literally just wanted to make sure she like called out the right person. So she was like, "Which one is it?" And then I sure, yeah, you did Gorilla. That was the person sitting next to us.
Reminds me of this really this mad cringy story.
Huh?
It was obviously, yeah. It wasn't that great a story again. Listen, Loco's anecdotes today. He's starting off slow. He's going to keep working with them, He's going to gradually work his way up. Here's the thing. He's nailed the first part, which is like, I've got a great story. Here's the beginning of the story. He hasn't. The body of the story and the punchlines kind of fall a bit flat. Plus, to be fair, I mean, I remember this hilarious scenario. We all laughed so much. When CLG accidentally thought they were picking up Lost Boy to be a support for Doublelift, they were like, "Oh, it's going to be so sick. He's so good as support." And then Loco dropped in. They were like, "It's weird because I've never seen like Lost Boy usually plays like Lulu and Janna and stuff. Why is he playing Nunu all the time? He almost seems like he doesn't know the position." And in the end, it was all okay though because they sent you home, and all worked out well for everyone, right? So, problem solved.
Do his anecdotes get better as time goes on? Because I'll be honest.
Seth, you're supposed to be on my side. Seth, you're all supposed to be on my side. Why are you like?
It depends. Here's the thing. I will say, to be fair, usually his anecdotes are better than that. I don't know why he's just picked some weird ones this week. It's like he got the first part that he did have an anecdote that connected. He didn't think it was a great anecdote, Like I'm still wondering. Like part of me still stuck on the girlfriend one, wondering like why that would be an interesting story.
It was interesting because it included me and Seth and his ex-girlfriend and like.
I watched a bit of like the Ashley Kong episode, but otherwise like I honestly haven't tuned in that much.
Oh, so, dude, go on.
Loco, are your balls gonna drop again? Because your voice like modulated a lot during that episode.
I figured that it was a power cable problem. I fixed that one. Okay.
The irony is I've been asking that question for years and I didn't even know anything about the Discord problem.
All right. Anyways,
here's one question I have before we move on. I have to ask this. If you saw the Ashley Kang interview, did you see at the end when he starts asking like for questions from viewers? Did you see any of that part? Did you see the hilarious Freudian slip he made? Where, of course, he wanted to say to his fans, like, guys, ask questions, but, like, don't ask anything sexual because we've got a female guest. And instead what he said was, guys, like, please be respectful of your questions because we've got a sexual guest. And you can even see on the episode, I just look like... But anyway, I thought I'll just fucking let it go. He's made that mistake, honestly. Just leave it at that.
I did not catch that, but it's hilarious.
It's worth going back and watching that. It's about 20 minutes before the end of it. It's unreal. Because if they think it's a genuine, like, Freudian slip, he doesn't notice it himself, And me and Ashley can still just sort of go like, well, that's awkward, but let's just not address that. It'd be worse if we address it at this point. So.
Do you regret asking me onto this show now, Loco?
No, like, here's the thing. Being on TSM and being on TL and getting hated by the community really helped me develop a thick skin, and like anything shitty happens in my life.
Thick skin?
He said a thick skin there. Come on, guys. Come on.
Oh my god. I said
he said a thick skin.
Thick skin.
He's not circumcised, and then someone reversed the process by being on TSM. Like that wasn't anything that happened. He just has a thick skin because he's on that, and that's it. I would never bring up Loco. I never actually normally wreck you for your list. It's just I saw that Achillios was buckled by it, so we've addressed that now. Keep going.
Okay. Anyway, so
carry on.
Like anything bad happens in my life, like honestly, it's like nothing now. It's like this shit. It's nothing compared to what I had to go through. And then so
I like to think that Damien and I conditioned you pretty well.
What?
We were always giving you shit on the regular, so.
You guys were assholes. Anyway, it's like I dealt with assholes on TSM. I dealt with assholes on TL. I'm dealing with assholes with Thorin. So like, Yeah, dude, like, I don't know. You have to really hurt me deep down inside. Like, you have to really come at me somewhere.
Challenge accepted. No, anyway. No, here's the thing, right? I actually think we're on a good track on this episode generally. Because what we'll do is we'll definitely talk about League as the episode goes on, guys. And we'll gradually transition into that. But I actually think some of this stuff's interesting at the beginning because people want to know what it's like to live in Korea. They want to know what the atmosphere like. So I thought one thing we could talk about that would be quite interesting is, like, when you first went to Korea, Seth, did you have all that stuff in your mind of like, oh my God, esports is so huge in Korea. It's like the biggest sport after baseball. And, you know, fucking if boxer walks the street, he's mobbed by adoring fans. Did you have all that in your mind as you went there? Was it some like MECCA to you?
I mean, to a degree, obviously, like I had spent about a week and a half, I guess, in Korea before, just with C9 in their boot camp in 2015, and that's not nearly enough time to really experience it at all, especially when I was working. But I got a taste for the environment and just, you know, kind of how things go. It was in a much busier area than what I've lived in since I moved here, because I was in Gangnam for that. But yeah, I mean, like, I knew going into it, like, this is the birthplace of esports. I had watched, you know, a million, you know, documentaries and streams and all that kind of stuff. I tuned into the LCK on the regular, or Champions as it was known at the time.
When it was good.
Rest in peace. And yeah, like I kind of knew, like, yeah, this is the place where esports is more welcomed. I guess I kind of had like maybe a misunderstanding about how legitimate was as far as like a job goes. Like, a lot of people think like, yeah, like, if Korea, you know, if a player or a young player says that they want to become an esports player, like, the parents are fucking fine with it. That is not the case, you know, like,
Definitely.
not necessarily the case. Like, there are obviously edge cases where that can happen if their parents rather are in the know. And obviously, like, we have Innovation's younger brother who is currently playing in the Kespa Cup, and they won their first match and everything like that. Hey, Kespa Cup tie-in for the first time. Like, obviously, his parents are going to be preconditioned to be like, yeah, your brother is very successful. He's a fucking bunchwa and all this kind of stuff. Like, if this is the path you want to take and you're good enough, then that's fine. But yeah, maybe I had like some kind of grandiose idea about how big esports was here, but you learn very quickly, like, it's very popular. It's not a surefire career for a lot of people. You know, not everybody's going to be accepting of it. Some people will reject it because it's video games, that kind of thing. But like, I feel like it was a pretty even integration for me, like, moving from NA to Korea as far as my expectations overall.
Well, one thing I do want to mention is, like, throughout the whole episode, like, people are gonna think, oh, it's like easy to immerse yourself in Korea because you did it so well and like you understand the culture and everything, but that's just not the case for most foreigners. I think like you're an exception, like, where you actually immerse yourself properly into the culture and like you understand all the nuances that come with it. In general, like, Koreans are racist, as per the earlier point, because they didn't grow up with other races and you weren't taught like, hey, there's people that look different than how you look or how your parents look, and that's completely fine, and they have different cultures and stuff like that. You're not taught that in Korea. And also there's two huge factors in terms of Koreans being racist. Or two huge like things. It's military people, like GI people, and English teachers. The GI people that come to Korea most of them are not respectful. Like, they flash their gun, they show grenades sometimes at bars, like, they're just not respectful in general. I'm not saying all military people are, but in general, that is like a very big overlying, like, historically, like, anyone that came from the military, foreign-wise to Korea has not been respectful towards like Korean culture. And the other big one is like the English teachers. There's definitely like a group of English teachers that come over that have yellow fever, that are there to like date Asian women because Asian women are submissive, like, and it ruins a lot of Koreans, I would say, viewpoint on what foreigners are like. And most foreigners just live in Itaewon or Hongdae or sometimes Gangnam if they're richer, and they just speak with English speaking friends, eat English food, and go to their English speaking work and don't integrate themselves into the culture. What Seth is describing of Korea and his experience of Korea is someone that was respectful towards the Korean culture, that was actually willing to learn, and that integrated themselves. Like if you're a foreigner like watching this show and being like, oh, I'm gonna go to Korea, and it'll be like, Seth, like I'll meet a lot of Koreans, I'll eat Korean food, and like people will love me, and I'll get along, and I'll be respectful of the culture. Like it really takes a lot of work, and like you actually have to learn the culture, and you actually have to put in the work. Where like I think your experience is great, but it's not as easy as like you're making it sound.
Sure. I mean, like, it does take effort. I mean, like, one of the most minuscule things that you can do, and one of the things that I did before I even moved out here, before I even had my visa, was just learn how to read the language, because so many things, especially things that like somebody new to Korea, the places you would gravitate to are places that are familiar, you know, like English brands and stuff like that. Places that you can find in America, like Subway, Starbucks, etc. It's the same menu. It's just written. It's the English menu written phonetically in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you learn how to read Korean, it's the same menu, and you can order fucking anything that you would order in America. So, like, chai tea latte is just chai tea latte. Like, it's just that's it. Like, it's literally like not different at all. But if you can read it, you'll realize that, and that will help you when you go to, you know, more Korean places and everything like that, and you're sitting there at the menu and you can figure out what is actually there, and you can order it in Korean, and then that, you know, and that brings in the appreciation from the you know, the owners of the business or whoever, the bartender, whatever, wherever you are, and then you start that slow integration.
I want to kind of shift to League, and one thing we can touch on that connects to this is Korean imports in North America. Piglet is someone that reached incredible heights in Korea. He won OGN, he won Worlds on a Korean team with SKT, and then when he came to TL, he didn't have the same kind of success. You're someone that actually worked in TL, and I'll touch in on this too.
I must have missed where Faker was on fucking Team Liquid as well. Like, my bad, homie. Like, how can you just say it like that?
Piglet is someone that reached incredible heights in Korea. He
was a fucking amazing individual player in the LCS.
Yeah. What, Piglet?
Oh, your fucking mind. First of all, you know that Matt guy who's never done jack shit? He literally had that dude on his back, like fucking E.T. at the end of the movie when the guy's just riding like a... What are you doing? What are you talking about? Piglet was a monster in the LCS. The guy's so good, he even played mid lane, which he didn't even know how to play. Was fucking good for about 3 games of that. That's how good this guy was.
So
anyway, back to your bullshit characterization.
Okay. Piglet was someone that reached incredible heights in Korea, and he wasn't able to reach the same kind of heights in North America, and he had a lot of team issues, a lot of... You don't think that question's legitimate?
It's just such a stupid question. Like, think about the premise. He didn't reach the same heights. I must have missed which NLCS team did win Worlds. None of them. What about which of them ever did anything comparable to win an LCK? None of them. So basically, it was impossible, no matter which NLCS team he was on, to ever reach the heights in Korea. Therefore, the entire premise is fraudulent. Continue on, dog shit interview a Loco, my mistake.
Oh my god. He could showcase his skill, and he could still reach a height on TL.
I don't think he was good individually on Team Liquid.
I think he was good individually on Team Liquid, but the problem I'm alluding to is why he didn't get to perform as much on Team Liquid, and what were some of the problems with Piglet being on Team Liquid like that arose.
So I came in after the whole, you know, like Keith shift and everything like that, when Keith took over the starting spot and whatnot. And then by the time I had joined Team Liquid, Piglet was back into the starting slot. Keith was still there, and I think within about maybe 2 to 3 weeks, you on TSM stole Keith away, and we were very sad about that because we liked him. But like, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't think about is honestly just the total culture shift. Going from America to Korea, honestly, not that difficult, at least for me. Maybe that's because I'm open-minded and I'm respectful of other cultures and that kind of stuff, and I've traveled a lot. I don't know. But going from Korea to America, complete fucking shift. It is a massive change. And that's one of the biggest struggles that players and teams alike will have. Like Overwatch League, obviously, there's a lot of teams that are full Korean import. London Spitfire, entirely Korean. Now you have Vancouver, which is formerly Runaway, entirely Korean. One of the biggest challenges that you have to tackle is getting those players integrated into America. And Team Liquid made efforts to do that. Obviously, there was the video that they put out, sponsored by Quest and all that bullshit, where it's like, you know, let's have a Piglet Christmas party thing or whatever, and they theme the house and they try to cheer them up and all that kind of stuff. But you can, you know, try as you might, it doesn't mean that the player is going to be able to shift naturally. And that was the biggest issue, at least initially, with Piglet. Was that he just didn't really take to American culture and being away from home very well at all. He, you know, very much missed home. He missed his girlfriend. He missed his family. You know, he went from, you know, living at home with his family to now being half a world away in a country where he can't speak the language to communicate with anybody, let alone his teammates. So, you know, that's a major shock for somebody. The other thing, I guess, is like, being from a team like SK Telecom, where you are a world champion, you are this star-studded player, you know, you were formerly one of the best AD carries in the world, and then you go over to America where it's like, yeah, I'm here to perform, I expect that we're going to make it to Worlds and everything like that, but like, you're on a team with players who have never achieved as much as you. That can raise your ego, and I love Piglet so much. He's one of my favorite players. I love Guangjin as a person. He can, you know, think of himself very highly, and I think that he should. I think that he is a very skilled player, but sometimes that can get in the way of working together as a team. You know, when you're putting yourself before the team and you're thinking like, I'm so much better than these people. Why the fuck is this happening? You know, why am I playing with these people? Because, you know, like, you know, we're losing in scrims or something like that, or we shouldn't have lost to this team. That can really affect you mentally. And I think that it was a combination of culture shock and maybe pridefulness that kind of got in the way.
Sure. I've got some stuff to say on this topic, because I think this actually ties into what you said earlier about Westerners thinking they can go to Korea and it's going to be like awesome. They're going to make all these friends and they're going to be learning the language in no time. Like, first of all, Korea has got to be Korean as a language is supposed to be one of the hardest languages for Westerners to learn, because it has no similarities to any like romantic language or any Germanic language, any of the basis of what European language is basically like comes from. Like, even the structure is nothing similar whatsoever. Like, if you start learning Spanish, okay, you're not going to instantly know it, but like you'll very quickly understand the structure and a lot of the basic concepts, and you'll even be certain like loan words that'll be the same. So language alone is going to be a nightmare. Like, legitimately, if you want to get good, I don't know how much you did this, Achilleos, but I know, for example, Brendan Valdez, who was doing commentary in Korea. I know he's one of the people who, when he got to Korea, he just basically was doing like a course in English where you did it like multiple times a week. And he told me after like a year, he was barely even able to do like conversational stuff with a normal person. A whole year of literally doing it like school, like going in the morning, doing a bunch of so if you're just going to go there and think you've got like a phrase book and you're going to pick it up, you're never going to pick up shit. Like, you can do it. You'll literally almost be a waste of your time unless you're going to stay for like 5 years or something. So that's that already. That's going to make it super hard. Then the culture itself is so impenetrable if you have no sort of like initial ways in. Like, none of the things that your brain thinks is common sense, and it's just things you grow up intuitively understanding in your head. None of that's going to apply to a lot of the areas. So again, you need friends who can help you. You need stuff off the internet that can help you out. So it's actually hard work, even just learning the basics, becoming friends with people. And then I'd also say this, and this is a key part that we can tie into the Piglet part, is if you're someone who's been a massive gamer, and particularly if you're in esports, remember esports, like gaming itself until the last like 10 years wasn't even that like mainstream activity. So even of gaming, then you have the people who play online games. Then you have the people who watch people who play online games and follow this. Like, that's such a tiny niche that those are the most hardcore people, at least in the past. Like, these are people who will stay up till 4 a.m. to watch LCK, or they'll watch like 9 hours of the LCS broadcast or something, like, you know, like pretty hardcore behavior. That sort of person generally I've found is someone who, because they're a nerd, they're not even that socialized to their own culture that much. You know, like, they'd be that awkward if they went out to a random Starbucks in their own city. So if that guy tries going to Korea and doesn't know the language and doesn't know any of the culture, that guy is going to be in big trouble, especially because since he's not going to be someone probably who wants to go outside his comfort zone, he's just going to stick to what he knows. He's going to go to the McDonald's. He's going to go to just the 7-Eleven where you don't need to speak English and you can get some basic drink or something, He's going to hang around with like someone vaguely that he knows and create. He's probably not going to try and like meet people and like try and get brand new friends and dare to try all these exciting things, but things that could be like embarrassing or you would feel uncomfortable naturally. Like everyone here, I'm sure, has had the experience when you were younger of going to a party where you don't know anyone and you spend the first half an hour at least. Some people might spend the whole night just thinking like, I should really go up and talk to them. It's not the right time. I feel a bit uncomfortable. And then you have that thought that people made into that meme of like, I should have just stayed home. I could have been having a good time, like watching stuff on Netflix or playing a game. Like that thought will just be in your mind the whole time. So now imagine that you're a Korean player and you go to the LCS, right? I always think that one of the reasons people judge the Koreans so harshly when they come to LCS is because secretly they want to believe two things. One, this guy isn't actually that good. Like, if he was just on his own and he played double, if he'd get crushed, it's the whole Korean system that made him good. And then the other part is they also want to believe that it's some scenario of like, it's just like, I don't know how they rationalize it. It's only because Koreans practice with each other and they're in Korean that they're the best. It's like, well, you sort of saying Koreans are the best. No, it's just that they practice with other Koreans. It's like, I've never been able to like resolve that paradox in my brain. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But when they come to the West, they just judge them as though it's any player. Like they judge the guy from Korea as though it was like someone from fucking Canada coming and playing the LCS. No, that guy literally like doesn't speak any of the language, doesn't know any of the culture, doesn't even have any impetus to, by the way. He's only going there probably to play for money. Also, this is probably one of the biggest problems. When you go somewhere, you have an idea. This is why I asked Seth what his perceptions were. You have an idea of what that place is like. Well, sometimes you like the idea, but then the reality isn't as fun. Or, the reality is nothing like what you thought sometimes. So I'm sure some of these people get to LA and then they're just like, holy shit, everything is different. And you know what? Half the shit I'm not liking. Like, I don't have anyone to talk to, or I have the one dude on my team who's Korean I can talk to.
Phoenix,
he's probably getting sick of talking to me. There's so many factors that you could easily see impinging on someone's play that I go the other way. By default, I assume most Koreans aren't going to do as well when they come over. And I go the other way. And whoever does make it, I give them mad props. Like if you're Ryu, if you're like, I'll give you some credit on this one. If you're Someday, Impact, if you are these players, you are gods. Like I don't give a fuck what anyone says. The fact that you could go and play anywhere close to your level in a totally foreign culture, like overnight, you are a fucking god, mate. I know in the game you might not be the best, but that is amazing.
That's one of the most impressive things that can happen, and that's why it was, I guess, impressive that, like, just to go back to Overwatch for a second, like that London Spitfire was able to come back in and like win the entire championship in Overwatch League. When a team, or even just when it's specific players, like you're saying, can show that they can integrate really well and communicate with their squad, even though they're from a completely different culture and speak a completely different language, when they can show that they can learn that language and adapt to living in a new environment, that's really fucking impressive. Somebody in the chat's like listing off a couple different people, like Hoonie, Impact, Core JJ, Lustboy, etc. Like showing that you can even just integrate into the American culture, which is so fucking insane because it's all over the goddamn place. There's not really a clear American culture. It varies heavily, area to area. And especially in LA,
I'll just say this:
places, like
coming from England, where obviously we in theory speak the same language. America, when I've actually lived there for periods of time, like when I lived in Atlanta for E-League, even then I would constantly be finding things where it's like, oh, that's actually nothing like movies. Like, oh yeah, I thought I knew, like, the way this was. Or for example, I thought I could use stereotypes. Like, oh, I can guess what this sort of guy's. So I'll give you a famous stereotype that people outside of America always get wrong. Because of how fucking biased the media is, you think that if you meet someone from the country, they're all just going to be like fucking hicks and racists and stuff. Like, most of them aren't. They're most of them just lovely people. Like, it's very rare you meet people who are like the ridiculous like stereotype of what like a Republican voter would be in like the American media if it's like from New York or something. Like you just have all these like skewed extreme stereotypes, and half the time, even as someone coming from, in theory, like the closest culture to it, I had to relearn everything in that setting. So I can't even imagine what it's like trying to be someone Asian when you never even lived in one of those countries. It must be super hard. I have a lot of sympathy for it.
So one thing that Lustboy's parents asked him was, please don't buy guns, and please don't go to sex parties, because like in Korea, like when you watch America, like you see like people at parties, and like you see them in movies, like they're always like having sex, they're doing drugs, and like everyone has guns. So like Lust Boy's parents were like genuinely concerned, and like one thing they asked Lust Boy was like, please, I don't want you to buy guns, and I really don't want you to go to sex parties.
I can't even handle that. Lost Boy's parents are like leaning in, like, son, please do not buy Glock 9mm and go to checks paper Compton. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like,
well, that's why he's stuck close to Loco, because he knew that he wouldn't be anywhere near guns, drugs, or sex.
Yeah. One thing I do want to.
That was pretty good, actually. That was pretty. Let's just salute that for a moment. Let's acknowledge that. Go on.
One thing I do want to talk about with Lustboy was when he came over and I wanted to integrate him. Like we had rules, like starting from end of breakfast until end of practice. Like don't speak Korean to me. When you're speaking to me, please speak in English. Try not to speak to me as much. Try to speak with your teammates. Try to speak it in English first before you ask me in Korean. If I need to translate, I will translate. Like I force them to be uncomfortable and to give up things like that are Korean, that are gonna make things easy. It's really hard for the player to do. Like they have to learn a new language. They have to play somewhere like they never played before with all the complications like you guys mentioned. And Lustboy did all that, and that's why I do think he was able to integrate it. And yeah, I have to give huge props to all the players that are able to integrate well, because it's extremely hard. So
there's another angle as well. Like, go on, Achilles.
I was just gonna say, like, if you come into it and you really do tackle trying to learn the language full on, then that is a huge thing. Like, even now, I mean, going back and seeing a lot of the Koreans who I knew in America while I was at Team Liquid, or even ones that I met while I was here after I moved to OGN and everything like that, and then seeing them while they come back and visit, and just seeing how much English they've learned in that time, it's fantastic. Like I actually feel ashamed because I'm like, you have learned so much more English than I have learned Korean, like comparatively. Like I am lacking significantly in this regard. But that's one of the most daunting things, I think, is just actually taking up the challenge of learning the language, diving into it, having somebody who will teach it to you, and then making sure that you're doing lessons and all that kind of stuff. Like if a player is willing to do that, props to them.
I mean, that's where I
don't feel too bad on that angle though. Like that's one angle, by the way, that I hate when people try to do that on the internet, where like it's a thing that this is, by the way, how you know that actually a lot of Western people aren't racist and xenophobic, because it's a famous thing that people who are American or British often say, like, oh my god, I only know one language, English, but you guys know like Spanish, and think it's like, yeah, because the fucking universal language right now is English. All fucking Hollywood shit, all the pop music is in English. Like it's actually logical that you would attempt to learn these languages because you're actually being inundated with it anyway. Plus, because of those things, you have a massive benefit to learning that. Like anyone who's read a book knows that if the book is just very easy to read, like it just captures you immediately, you'll be able to read way more of that book than you would if like you had to make yourself sit down and read it, right? So I'd give the same analogy. Like if all the great movies in history were in like fucking Russian, man, I'd learn Russian because obviously I'd want to hear it in the original language. I'd want to know what the context was, like what was the cultural aspect. If, as you see, there's about 10 Korean movies that are really worth watching as a Westerner, I'm probably not going to learn it. I'm just going to pop those subs on, just get on with my fucking life, aren't I?
That's why most esport people know Japanese.
For you,
all right, that's why most esport people know some Japanese and know some Korean, because like they watch anime and because of K-pop and because of esports. Like that's why they know some conversational Japanese and Korean.
It's honestly, it's such a good way to learn a language. And I know that actually Quas, speaking of a player who learned a new language, Quas, before he had moved into Team Liquid, he was learning English by watching English television. And that's how he picked up on it. And that's actually such a good way to learn things. If you just turn the subs off and listen to the show and try to understand the context and everything like that, like, you can start to learn some things. Obviously, like subs on will help you a little bit more, but it might distract you from actually listening to the language and, hearing the words that are being spoken and everything like that. But like I've learned a bunch of like, kind of like one-off terms, not so much like actual conversation pieces, but like I've learned some things by watching Korean movies and stuff like that. But yeah, like it can be so very good for you.
Yeah. Well, speaking a little bit more on League, do you watch LCS at all? Because I want to kind of ask an LCS question.
No, never.
Okay. So obviously a yes. So how do you think Piglet is going to do on Clutch, where he's surrounded by more Koreans now with Lyra and Huni? He does have 2 American players in Demonte and Vulcan, where Vulcan he did play with on Academy. Do you think he's going to be able to get closer and closer to his height? And overall, how do you think Clutch is going to do?
I think that Piglet will be fine. I think that he's hit a point now. He is a North American player. He's been there long enough. He speaks enough English. It's been quite a long time since he had his, world championship victory and everything like that. So I don't think there's going to be any issues as far as, culture shift, anything like that, prideful nonsense. I think that this is honestly going to be very good for him. I think that as far as where Clutch would place, that I'm not, I guess, comfortable enough to speak about, as their power ranking, because I don't know every NALCS roster off the top of my head, or just LCS, because that's what it is now.
Sure.
There's no more EU. It's LEC or whatever, and but I think that they would honestly be pretty good. Lyra can be very hit miss, but I think that in a roster where they can speak a little bit more Korean and have more integration in that regard, or at least outside of the game and be closer, things will probably be pretty good. I would expect them to be within the top 5, maybe 5.
There's another angle as well to the whole Piglet, because obviously Piglet's the most extreme example, because nobody ever, except maybe, people don't know the stories, but the only person I'd put in this category would be ganked by mom. Beyond Piglet, no one else really went to the West and also famously misbehaved or was didn't understand the culture and acted out. Most of the other ones, if they go there and it doesn't work, they just get fucking sad, play badly, and the career ends, or they go back to Korea. Usually it's not a big story that they didn't integrate. People just think they weren't good players or whatever. But I would say this. You have to stop and think the cultural background Piglet's coming from within esports in Korea. If he comes to a team like Team Liquid, and then, first of all, none of the players in this team have done anything that he would respect. They've played in the fucking LCS. As you mentioned, they've never been to Worlds. Maybe when he got Xpecial hard, okay. But even then, Xpecial isn't really on Piglet's radar. Piglet's won Worlds. Xpecial's a player on a team in the fucking group stage of Worlds. Koreans very much respect accomplishment.
Dominate also went to Worlds, but yeah, he probably didn't even know Dominate went to Worlds.
Sure, but you know what I mean? On that level, they wouldn't know this.
I didn't even know that.
Sure. They would think to themselves naively, Westerners, if I'm respectful to him, he should be respectful to me. It's well, no, you have to win his respect over. Secondly, if he starts playing the game and you are even vaguely worse than him at the game, then one, you better not ever be flaming him, because how the fuck could you flame him? He's way better than you and a world champion. Totally a logical frame of mind if you come from his background. And secondly, if you are worse than him and you are practicing less than him, fuck you and everything you stand for. Because you're worse than him. You're not even practicing as much as possible and doing what the coach says. You can see how naturally, I haven't even had to get into Piglet's personality. Naturally, these things would actually seem borderline offensive to a Korean person.
Yeah.
That was one of the big things that I had noticed, and obviously people had talked about it. It's not news at all. I'm not giving the fucking sick leaks from 2016. Piglet was always on the grind. He would go to scrims, he would practice that. Occasionally he'd have his night out, he'd go to K-Town, get some barbecue, have some soju, whatever the fuck. But if he was at home, just a little bit, one shot, just hana, that's it. But if he was at home, he was playing the game. Whether or not he was streaming, he was playing the game, and that's just what he would do. And he did not have that much respect for people who weren't practicing. If you were home and you were fucking around, you're watching Netflix, whatever, he was why aren't you practicing? That was a big issue for him.
Piglet tried to succeed in America the same way he tried to succeed in Korea. That's, I think, where the biggest problem arose for Piglet. He expected the same thing out of his teammates as he would from Korean teammates, and he practiced and behaved the same way he would if he was in Korea, where that wasn't the case. He's in America, he's with different kind of teammates, he's in a different world, he has to behave differently, his expectations has to change, and I think that was the biggest problem with Piglet. I do actually agree with Dorian in terms of Piglet's individual skill and how good he is individually. When Piglet is on point, he's better than Doublelift. He smashes Doublelift in lane, where Doublelift is so much more successful in North America is Doublelift can lead, Doublelift knows how to work with his teammates better, he understands the culture, he can shot call. That's where it lacks, and that's where Doublelift just smashes Piglet, because it's not just about individual laning, it's about post game, like what can you tell your teammates to make sure they're more bought in, like how can you lead them, and where Doublelift grew a lot on that, and he can provide a lot on that. Like Piglet can't provide any of that to his American teammates. And I think later towards his career, I saw it when I was coaching him. I really wanted Piglet to kind of lead Matt and be an older brother to Matt, and he didn't feel a need to at first. He felt like that was his problem with X Special. He was like, why doesn't X Special just know how to do this? Like, it's so fucking annoying. Like, he should be doing this right now. And when X Special doesn't do it, he would just...
Especially if you've heard, the guy's a veteran, he's been a champion here. You think, come on, does he know these basic things that we all know in Korea?
Yeah, and he would be upset at X Special and like yell at him and rage at him. And he did the same thing to Smoothie, where he was just super fucking frustrated. And like I think it was like a week into me coaching Piglet, I set Piglet down and I told him, like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, you treat these players like they're gonna know. You treat these players like they're just gonna listen if you behave that way. Like, they don't want to listen. Like, you're failing in North America. Like, you're being like a little fucking shithead. And Piglet's someone that's like really emotional and really bought in, and he cried. And after that, I really started to see a lot of change with him. I told him about, like, if you want to do well with Matt, like, you have to start teaching Matt. Like, don't expect him to know. Like, you are teaching someone that's brand new. Matt has never played in LCS. He hasn't even fucking played in Academy. He just made Academy qualifiers. And I think that's why on the it's 2016, right? Not 2015?
Yes, that was the year, yeah.
2016 spring, TL saw a lot of success with rookies and Piglet, someone that did not work well with like rookies or North American players in the past, because he started to change his viewpoint a little bit on, if I'm going to work with North American players, my expectation has to be different, and I have to start being a hyung and a teacher to these players, like a mentor. And I think we saw that with him and Vulcan, like both of them getting moved up together. And I do agree with Seth. I think he'll do better on Clutch, but I think overall Clutch roster has big flaws, like DeMonte and mid being like a rookie player, having to go up against all these talent, and Huni and Piglet both being resource heavy players that are going to be on opposite sides of the map. So I do think they're going to struggle, but I will agree with you on Piglet is going to be better, and it's going to be a better environment for Piglet.
Plus, again, actually, to tie it in, to finish up the whole angle of when he was on Liquid, there's a reason why it makes absolutely perfect sense to me when I heard that, like, him and Dardoch didn't get along. Because think about two things Dardoch was at that time. A fucking rookie. The idea that a rookie is going to talk shit to a world champion. Again, a Korean person is like, I can't even believe this is happening. Yeah. And also, if he's going to do that, like, surely the coach takes care of this, and I never have to deal with it. Like the idea, like, people are just sat around like, oh, what are you going to say to that? Like, what the fuck? Like, well, shouldn't he be like benched? And then secondly, not only was he a rookie, he's younger than him. Mm-hmm. If you are younger than someone in Korea, even forget someone accomplished, and you're talking mad shit to someone older than you. Again, you wouldn't even need to say that. Everyone else would be saying, like, hey, you can't do that. Hey, be respectful. Like, no one's doing that shit, because in the West we have different perspective, especially gamers. Like, we have our own unique culture, don't we?
And a lot of one more thing I do want to touch on that. Management did not punish Dardoch accordingly, and management often enough sided with Dardoch, because long term they thought they had a bigger future with Dardoch than they did with Piglet or me or anyone for that matter. TL thought Dardoch was their future, so they were very invested into Dardoch. So yeah, like, from Piglet's point of view, I can see where it would be hugely problematic. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback off what Thorin said, basically, about just to give, I guess, a little bit more context on, like, the hierarchy as far as, like, your age goes in Korea. Like, casting at OGN and everything like that, like, I see Figure on the regular. The first time I saw Figure, which that was at Worlds 2015 when I was in Paris, I was fucking starstruck. That was probably the last time I got starstruck. And then transitioning into casting and everything, I would see him all the fucking time every time SKT played, and I would be like I just want to say hi to this guy, but he would always bow to me because I'm older than him. And that, at first that was mind blowing. I was like, why the fuck is Faker, Bonjour Supreme, greatest gamer in the world, bowing to me? And then I learned, like, this is just the culture. Like, you respect those who are older than you. And it really does ring true. The fucking police are coming to get Loco. But it really does ring true. Like, that is, like, one of the most important fucking things.
Comedy police saw the first anecdote. They've decided it's time to pick him up before he goes too far. He's becoming a serial problem at this point.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, one other thing, though, along those lines, like, Like, that's actually an example, though, by the way, of where, I said jokingly earlier that as a Westerner, you can sort of choose when to apply the rules and when you don't. Don't worry, Koreans also do understand that premise, that sort of like gap between what you're supposed to know and what you might know. And they exploit the fuck out of it themselves as well. Like, I'll give you a great example. I've told this story before on a different angle, right? Which is that when I famously said certain things about the Korean scene. So, for example, I said that like Koma was ruining fucking esports by not playing Faker when like it was like the spring of season 5 when he's playing Easy Hoon instead. There was also an angle where I won't say the circumstances because people get mad, but there was a certain circumstance where I believe that some Korean team actually match fixed a certain game. And again, I said it publicly on Summoning Insight. Right after this happened, I've told this part of the story, which is that Cloud Templar, who was a caster for LCK at the time, and obviously worked at the same studio as Monty, but one desk over, came up to Monty and he was saying to Monty, like, how can he say this? Like, how can you let him say these things? And then Monty was like, like, he's his own man. Like, I don't have any control over him. And I even said to Monty when he told me this, I said, what do you mean, Monty? The answer's obvious. You said to Cloud Templar, you do know Thorin's older than you, right? Please be respectful to him. Don't ever speak that way. And so I told him, listen, mate, if he wants, remember, he's trying to imply that I should understand Korean culture and behave accordingly. Go ahead and behave to me, Dong-san. Let's see what's up, homie. You want to come drink with me? I'll drink you under that fucking table. You all have to drink when the guy who's older than he tells you to. If you want, here's the thing, Cloud Templar. You want to 1v1 me, bitch? I'll meet you anywhere in Seoul with a fucking bar and some soju, and we can sort this shit out. Or you can back the fuck off. You can do like Loco and vividly remember when you were good in season 2, and you can get on with that fucking commentary, boy. There we go.
Good luck getting Cloud Templar out the drink. If it's not a Hoishik, he probably won't go because that man's got some fucking kids to take care of at this point.
He has 2 kids, and also he does streaming daily, YouTube content. Like,
I'll make him my fucking kid.
Doesn't he have 3 kids?
I'm sure he's 2. Did he have a 3rd?
I thought maybe. I mean,
last time I met him was a year ago, and he had 2.
I always mix up the number of kids of like who has what with Cloud Templar and Artosis, to be honest, because like they both just had like a fucking explosion of children simultaneously. Yeah, Artosis has 3 because he had twins. So yeah, okay, Cloud Templar has 2.
Okay. Oh, one thing I do want to speak on, more league related stuff. Now, Crown is going to Optic. Crown is someone that is very, very grindy and that is very, very emotional. He actually reminds me a lot of Piglet. Like, world champion, has ups and downs. Like, just whenever he feels down on himself, he plays insane amount of games, and he expects people around him to kind of do the same. I think Crown is going to be ginormous, like, explosion on Optic. I don't think it's going to work well for Crown. I don't think it's going to work well for Optic. I think the other teammates that he has, like 2 rookies and, well, I guess not rookies technically, but Dokla and Big, and the junglers, now this is where, like, it gets really spicy, and
Dardoch and Meteos.
And Dardoch and
he has possibly the 2 worst Western junglers you could give to a guy who speaks barely in English and doesn't know Western culture. Like, good luck with that one.
That's okay. So so one part of what you said is fair. Crown actually speaks a good amount of English. I've had
That's not going to help him. That's going to make it harder, if anything, because he's going to understand how they're dissing him.
Look, I won't refute that. I'm just saying he does.
I guess that makes sense if he lived in Brazil, because obviously he wouldn't know Portuguese. So maybe I guess it would make sense.
Am I the only?
He lived in Brazil. He speaks a good amount of English. I've had conversations with Crown very frequently in between games and everything like that. He will be understanding, and I think that at least having Arrow on the team will be good for him to have another Korean to kind of ground him and everything like that, so he's not going to feel alone in the dark.
Arrow has very well adjusted to American life, and Arrow isn't very Korean anymore in terms of practice, in terms of skill level, in terms of dedication to the game. I actually think Crown and Arrow will also butt heads, where Crown will expect a lot from Arrow in terms of being a Korean on the team. You're my other person I can depend on to do well in game, to practice a lot with me, to like speak up whenever we aren't like fucking working hard. I don't think he's gonna have the same kind of support from Arrow that he might expect from a Korean. So maybe it's personally only me. That's my question to both you and Doran. Like, how do you guys think Crown will do on Optic, and how do you guys think Optic will do overall?
The problem I guess with the question, or the problem that I have with answering this is like, I really don't know, because Crown on a full Korean team where he went from being considered, maybe second best mid in the world, he dropped down to like not even on the fucking list. He fell so far off the spectrum that it was just, can we even talk about this guy as far as being a top mid laner in Korea, because he had such an abysmal season. when I think one of the biggest things that damned Genji, and look, I love Crown as a person, and his heyday when he was, like I said, when we can consider him like top 2 in the world, like he was fantastic. But I think one of the biggest problems that Genji had was taking Ambition and Haru to Worlds,
and not
as opposed to taking Fly.
Yeah.
I think that if you want to take Ambition and Haru to Worlds, you have to take Fly as your starting mid laner.
100%.
Otherwise, pick Ambition because he's the player that can play safer. He is the more experienced. He's the veteran player.
What's that word? What's that
marriage
word about?
buff?
What's that word about? Who's been somewhere longer? Oh fuck, longevity. Not longevity. Like whoever's been somewhere longer has more say or more right. That's a really huge...
tenure.
Tenure.
Yeah, he's got more tenure. Like,
that's a huge thing.
Ambition.
You're a bit low when I was
kind of
move closer to the mic.
Sorry.
Ambition's the kind of player who, if you get into dire straits, like he should be able to level out the team and maintain focus and make sure that everyone's playing optimally because he's been around the longest out of almost anybody who is playing in the LCK this past year. So, you know, that's the guy that you should want to turn to. So, like, if you're going to take anybody as, you know, as far as like substitutions and like having a hard lock spot instead of taking a sub, Ambition would be the one as opposed to Haru, because Haru didn't even see that much play, or at least not much successful play in the summer split. And Fly was the starting guy. It was so much more consistent for Genji when he was the starting mid laner. So I think that was a big fucking detriment to them. So like having Crown move into Optic, given the whole confusion is like who the fuck is going to be the starting jungler? Because they're like, yeah, Meteos is our starting jungler, and then they introduced Dardoch. I have no faith in Optic to do well at all. I think that if Optic performs above 7th place, it's a fucking surprise to me.
So the word I was looking for was seniority. So in America, where you might keep a player longer because of brand reasons, in Korea, sometimes you keep a player longer for seniority reasons. And I think that's where Ambition and Crown really got to keep their spots on Genji. I think it was obvious to everyone around, like as you said, like I think it should have been Fly and Haru Ambition, if anything, or you go Haru, Fly, and Crown. But I think Crown and Ambition got to keep their spots due to seniority. And how can you not bring them? Like, they've been with us the entire year. Like, Crown and Ambition won a Worlds with us. How can we not bring them to another Worlds? I think that was like a huge point in like Genji's decision making.
More than likely. And I mean, like, Crown is a very emotional player. We've all seen it. You know, when they lost in the gauntlet and everything like that, and Crown broke down into tears. Like, we know how he can get in high pressure situations, especially when he knows that he himself is not performing that well. And maybe it was something for the team to appease him as well. Like, I really don't know what happened with Genji, but I think that the best thing that they could have done was taking Haru Ambition and then Fly. Because Fly can play the different styles. He can play laid back. He can play aggressive if need be. It's not his primary style, but he can play more aggressively if he has to. But when you put him on something like a Galio, like an Aurelion Sol, where he's kind of passively in the team fight and can, you know, slowly chip away at people, that's when Fly really excels. And then you can basically fluctuate the style of play based on Haru and Ambition, where it's Ambition can be the more conserved player. He goes for the Sejuani. Haru is more of your classics, Lee Sin, exactly. Way more aggressive. So depending on what you think you need in between games, that's what you go for. But they didn't go for that shift. I mean, they went for the jungle shift, but they didn't have Fly there. And I think that really was a detriment. But yeah, overall, like, to be honest, like, I don't know who Dokla is as far as the top laner is concerned. I know Big, I know Arrow, obviously, but I was waiting to see what Optic was going to do with their roster. They had some of the later announcements as far as their roster is concerned. Yeah, and it almost seems to me like they're kind of checked out, and I just don't really expect much from this team.
Doran, what's your opinion on everything?
Problem with the Optic lineup for me is, like, if I just looked on paper and I just like looked in isolation at each player on the team, this lineup in theory should be good. Like it should be definitely a playoff team, you know, like depending on what happens with LOCO'S, kind of the X factor, maybe you could even be better, maybe you could challenge for the title. But the problem is whenever I view rosters, I always try to think like, what is the balance between these players going to be? Like, who's the resource heavy player? Who's the player who can play with a certain type of player? Who's the one who needs a certain style of play to succeed? And that's where this entire lineup looks like an absolute train wreck. Like for a start off, the whole jungle situation, this is my outside read. I don't have any inside information on this. The outside read for me is this. Meteos is the jungler of this team. I don't see logically, if you consider what happened with him on 100 Thieves and FlyQuest, why he would join an LCS team if he's not going to be the starter. It's clear that being a starter is important to him. And I think if he wasn't going to be the starter here, he either just goes and retires or becomes a streamer or something. So I think it's clear to me they gave Meteos the starting spot. And that Dardoch just didn't get a team, and he was probably thinking the last one that was left was TSM. Like, unless TSM gives him this spot or some EU team, I'm not getting a spot. And what happened was they told Dardoch, well, you know what, you can be our academy jungler, and you know, maybe there's the potential you could replace Meteos, or maybe, you know, in the future Meteos leaves and you come in. You know, like they sold him on that angle. That would be my outside like attempt to read between the lines. You know, so as a result, even though I actually think Meteos is a very good player, like, I actually think he's the guy who's best suited to a team with all Westerners. Like he's someone who wants to, like, because he has his own vision for how he wants to jungle. I don't think he's the guy where like Crown can't just call him to the lane all the time anytime he wants to. If he imagines that he's like a Korean jungler in that sense, like good luck. Like Meteos isn't going to be like that at all. And also you'd want Meteos and Crown to have great like communication, understanding. Like they come from such different backgrounds as players. Like I think they'd be really on different pages entirely. Like the idea to a Korean player who's only played in Korea, I know he's played in Brazil as well, but generally played his whole career. The idea of the jungler just deciding what he does in the game is a fucking alien concept. Like the jungler does what the coaching staff tells him to do. That's actually why sometimes you have junglers who fuck up at LCK because like the coach doesn't know how to use them, or even worse. I saw this in SK Telecom with that Blossom guy. Like if you have one bad game, they either just tell you like you're not playing anymore, or if you play, they're like, don't do that. It's like they can just actually like beat the confidence out of people somehow. So I think it's a very different one on that one. Some of the other players, quite frankly, I just don't like. I've never thought Arrow was that great. He had that one little split. He was good in LCS. I thought he was generally a bit played out in NA, you know. And then you look at the coach. This is the killer for me. I've mentioned this many times in the past. I think teams are really missing a trick in getting Koreans if they don't get a Korean coach. If not as head coach, at least as like assistant coach or something. Because Optic is stuck with Zabutin, that French guy that was brought in by Romain, and obviously he used to be like a commentator or something, I think, in France. As far as I know, the only Korean he has ever coached is Arrow. That's it. He doesn't have experience with like other Korean, definitely doesn't have experience. As you say, Arrow is actually more of a fun-loving, sort of outgoing Korean. He doesn't have experience with someone like Crown, like a really like sort of emotional, moody player who's withdrawn. Like if I was Zabutin, I'm not exaggerating, I would do what some of us did when we went to Korea and read as many books as you can about like Korean culture, Korean history, like the heritage, what they think of, how like there's a great book called The Korean Mind, like how they think of themselves, how they conceive society. These things might sound like they're fuck all they do in League of Legends, because it's never going to mention gaming in there, but it's going to mention all the things that might help you like clue apart the person and what kind of a person they are, what their background is, and what things infer. Because one of the toughest things, I alluded to it earlier, is the idea of like common sense. Because common sense really just means if we were all in the same town and went to the same school and watched the same television programs and were told the same things, yeah, common sense is the things that we all remember and understand apply in our lives. None of those things apply if you come from a totally different culture. So you're going to assume, first of all, things that they understand that they don't. And even worse, you will make inferences or draw conclusions from things that they do that they, again, don't mean in the same way. So as I gave the example of the restaurant before, the British person would think you were being really rude to him. They think you were purposely like not serving him, and like in reality, you're not even doing any of that. None of that's entered your mind. So he's going to have a whole thing in his mind where he's getting upset or annoyed or thinking, how dare that person, you know, like, and the whole thing is all in his brain and he doesn't know it because he's extrapolated from faulty data, as it were, because if he was in the West, it'd be a different kind of like pattern would follow. So I think generally the Optic lineup is a great example of someone who's made a lineup where on paper, the GM probably thinks he killed it. But in terms of actual, like, a real team, I think he's flunked hard. And that's why, actually, I've given the example before of GBM as someone I thought didn't work in the West. It reminds me of that NRG lineup that they made, where on paper, they all were good players. Remember, it was like GBM, Quaz,
Impact.
Was on this team.
No, it was Impact.
Impact.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Impact. Sorry,
Impact, Moon, Altec,
Moon,
Conquan, And GBM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this was a lineup that on paper that looks pretty fucking. Yeah, it was the one that you guys beat in the playoffs. I forgot. Like this was that lineup that on paper looked solid. You thought, hey, this team could do something. As a team, they were terrible because again, culture clashes everywhere. Players that didn't even make sense playing together. Like the wrong sort of jungler with GBM and stuff. Like the whole thing actually in reality was terrible. And I know if you're the guy who's the NRG guy, you're like, well, how could I know how it'd be? It's like, come on, mate, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you got to think before you get the player, not how good is the player, but does this player actually work with the other players? If they don't, I mean, you're trying something brand new. There's a good chance that can fail completely.
I want to kind of mirror this with Misfits. So when I was doing negotiations for Gorilla, like I talked about like you like bring a Korean onto the team isn't just bringing on a Korean. Like you need to provide him other stuff. Ben was so understanding. Ben was like, we're going to get a translator. We're going to get a Korean coach. Gorilla can bring on a sub to the academy team if he wants. Gorilla almost brought on a Korean player just to their academy team that's friends with Gorilla just to make sure Gorilla is comfortable. And like we'll cook Korean food. Like we'll fly your parents out here. Like Misfit was really, really prepared to make sure Gorilla was comfortable. It seemed like they had experience with Ignar. Also Jake, one of the managers there I worked with back on Goldcoin, and I told him like, hey, if we're gonna bring Mad Life over, Phoenix over, Fly over, this is how we have to make sure they're comfortable. These are like the kind of steps that we have to take. And it seems like Misfits really understood what it takes to incorporate a Korean player where, yeah, you contrast that with Optic, it's like, okay, we just get Crown. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, Misfits. I mean, obviously, it's almost entire. Well, I mean, other than Gorilla, it's entirely European, but they do have a very mixed roster as far as where players are from. Like Germany, France, now Korea, Great Britain, etc. Like, there's a good mix, and I think that's always very nice to have a blend like that. And it's good that they're tackling, bringing and integrating Gorilla full on, because that is very necessary. Like, I mean, because Europe, England, America, it's such a whole fucking different animal when it comes to a Korean player moving over. So the better they can feel, the more secure they can feel, that's going to make it infinitely easier. I have no idea what it's like in Berlin as far as like Korean food goes. I've heard some stuff. I know that I've heard that it's like really expensive to get Korean food and whatnot. So it's I imagine it's gonna be nothing like LA, where there's just like, go to Koreatown and here's all of the stuff that you would have gotten back home, but slightly worse and more expensive.
Okay. Well, another angle as well that's going to be really rough, I think, is that another thing that's really misunderstood. So we had this discussion a few episodes about like the structure of like in Korea, they always had like the head coach, and then they had like basically what we would call the analyst, but really it was just called the strategical coach or assistant coach or whatever. Yeah. Right? When they would have the head coach, another role that the head coach plays in Korea. Remember, a lot of the players that come as a practice partner or a rookie might only be like 15 when they start out. They might be very, very young when they get scouted. I know nowadays in LCK it'll be a bit higher because the age is you have to be 17 to play. But in the old days of Brood War, I'm not exaggerating, there were 14-year-old players. Flash, TY, the guy who used to be called Baby, who's in StarCraft 2 now, these guys were 14 when they were playing. So as a result, if you're recruiting 14-year-olds, another factor that is important for a head coach is you have to be like a father figure. Yeah. Like that means you have to like not only be a disciplinarian, which is part of being a father, obviously, but you have to literally be like role model. Sometimes you actually have to like emotionally comfort players who are missing home and stuff. If you come to the West, think about how many of our coaches are like basically guys where they don't have any leadership skills. You're not going to get any of that by default. They also don't have that expectation. They're like if you're the coach of Dardoch, yeah, you might tell him like, oh, we could be friends or something. It's never going to be like, I'm your dad. Like, I'm not, hey son, like, I hope you could, like, it's never going to be like that, is it? So I think a lot of the Koreans, that's something they will lack as well if they don't have a Korean coach, because you wouldn't even think that's what they need. Like, you wouldn't think this dude's going to want me to like hang around with him all the time, go out with him. You don't think, if anything, maybe he wants his space. We're different people. Like, it's so easy to fuck up, I think, with the Korean players that actually the upside of the fact there might be a sick player, it's really hard to activate that, in my opinion.
I mean, in Korea, like a really big thing is like when you're bringing a younger player over, or you're bringing even older players over from like their house to your gaming house, you go to the house physically and you meet their parents, and then like you kind of learn a little bit about their family and a little bit about the player themselves, and like you tell the mom and dad, hey, like I'm gonna really take good care of your kid, and like you meet it and like you feel it as like your responsibility to like take care of whoever you're bringing over. Where in America, I do believe it is very professional and it is very job-like, and it's sometimes even weird for, I think it's very, very rare for the coach to know the parents of the player, where in Korea, it's almost a given, where if you had this player for a while, you will definitely know their parents also, and you'll speak to them regularly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of varies team to team, and I think that more teams do need to pick that up. That was one of the big things that did impress me about Steve when I was at TL, was his kind of hands-on approach and interacting with the families pretty directly and whatnot.
Steve used to go meet the family and pay them as well. Whatever, keep going. It's an easy joke, isn't it? Keep going.
There you go. But I mean, that was one of the nice things, like, especially Dardoch. He was super young. Like, he was in high school, and he dropped out of high school to pursue League of Legends professionally. And Steve went and talked to their family.
Yeah.
They're from some small fucking town in Pennsylvania in the middle of nowhere, and he had to, go be like, hey, this might be weird. I know I'm like a 30-something-year-old dude, but like I want to hire your son to make a lot of money and come play for me on an esports team. And like he, explained it to them and it went on with the help of Dardoch, and they eventually were like, yeah, this seems like this is good for him. Like that's good. So when owners do that kind of thing, when they're very hands-on and very down to earth, that's where I really appreciate. Like if you're an owner, like especially in League of Legends, when you have these younger players coming in, like you can't just be full corporate. You have to have a personality. You have to have a humanity to you. It's not just whatever is in the company's best interest. Like obviously, like you want your business to be successful.
No, it is in your company's best interest to go and meet the parents of these younger kids.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. You have to have some humanity to you, I guess, and it's always fantastic when I see that kind of stuff. And that's why, like, as far as like owners who I've worked with and been around, Jack and Steve are probably my top two.
Andy's also very hands-on. Andy's someone that's because I think Jack and I agree with you. Like Jack is like a god tier owner, and actually
here comes the diss on Steve. Come on.
I was actually about to say
here comes the diss on Steve.
No, I actually was about to say Andy and Jack are probably the top two, but I thought for a second, and with everything that's happened in the last year, even with my bias towards Andy, Steve's actually done a really good job regarding like the Dota 2, like with the CSGO team even. So yeah, it's actually hard to say Andy is top two, but Andy is also very hands-on.
I never really worked that much with Reggie, so it's a little bit harder for me. I've been around Reginald, and he's always been kind to me, but I've never really directly worked with him. It was just kind of like, hey, we're at the LCS, or hey, we're at Worlds. So I never was that directly exposed to him as an owner.
Yeah, I miss esports being a little bit more hands-on and owners knowing all the players and everything being a little bit more tighter knit. Like now, like every team has like 4 or 5 games, like 2 franchises, like hundreds of players, like 5 different managers. Like it's hard for owners to be as hands-on. Like even with Steve, like we talked about how hands-on he was. I have not a single doubt in my mind he's not doing that for every single one of his players now. It's physically impossible. How many teams does he have?
Sure.
Like, yeah, I mean,
a lot.
Things are getting more and more corporate, and yeah, these are going to be like the nice nuggets we miss from esports being smaller.
Keeping it as grounded as possible is one of the best things. One of the experiences, I guess, that I received that kind of like detracted a little bit was, as somebody living in the apartment complex with TL and everything like that, like it was hard for me to get a face-to-face meeting with Steve. As a player, obviously he'd make time for them, no problem. When it came down to me having to get face-to-face time with him to talk about something, whether it was pay raise or whatever the schedule's going to be, or if I needed time off, like that became a little bit complicated. And that was a little frustrating because I was like, well, you fucking make time for all these guys over here, but like, and like it takes forever for me to get a meeting. But
to be fair, I think you just explained it there. The guy's a businessman. He wants to make money. You want a pay raise or fucking time off. I'm not going to be... If Achillios calls, I'm out, okay? And I'm just fucking in the room reading Archie comics. Like,
there's a finality to about the bank.
Okay.
But I'm saying, like, as I shifted into casting and kind of had like a step back perspective, I understood it. It's like, you know what, like I was an employee. These are the players. They need to have that instant reaction from the owner. And the fact that he was willing to give that to them was phenomenal. And the fact that I had to wait a little bit was perfectly fine. You know, I kind of realized like, well, yeah, like actually I was kind of being a little too demanding, being like, well, what the fuck? Like, why am I not getting the same treatment? I'm like, well, because
of course you're not. You're not a player.
That's the player. Yeah. That's the fucking person in front of the camera. That's the person that I'm filming. So they're the ones that are, you know, higher up the food chain, basically.
Players are the best treated employees on any team. On any team, players will always be the best treated.
Well, you would fucking hope so.
No, they will be, or because they're the most valuable.
Except MYM.
Oh. There's been a couple exceptions.
Yeah.
Where that's not the case. Standard Minds, hey, how's it going? But you know, in an ideal world, that's exactly what.
Because they can leave, they make the most money, they're your most valuable employee, dollar for dollar. Like without players, like teams can't function.
But actually, no, to be fair, I'm being too harsh in my joke there, because actually MYM did also try and live up to what you said and, you know, try and meet the parents, you know, get to know someone's family. So I guess, you know what, they took it the wrong way. There was some upside, there was some downside. What can I say? In the end, who can decide how it all worked out, right?
They went to the house, checked the valuation of it.
Exactly. The house, I'm going to take it, it's mine now.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Oh God! Hey, let's talk about Kespa.
Okay, let's talk about.
On that note,
let's start with this actually, because I wanted to know if either of you have a theory on this. Mm-hmm. But if you notice, there is a ridiculous trend that goes all the way back to season 3, where in season 3 there was no Kespa Cup, but famously they had the Korean World Cyber Games qualifiers right after Worlds, and famously that was where the whole Pawn versus Faker rivalry began, because at the time Pawn was on Samsung Blue and they beat SK Telecom, and in the end, actually, Blaze won that tournament and went on and won the World Cyber Games. But the years following, in the similar time frame, right after Worlds and right before the spring split, or at the time it was the Winter Champions tournament, they would always have this tournament. Now it's the Kespa Cup, and it would take place. It would always have the top Korean teams, including whoever the world champion was. But every single year, it is never A, won by SK Telecom, or B, by the best Korean team. It is always either some crazy upsets, like the ones I talked about there, the famous one being ESC ever winning it that year, or even last year, KT Rolster won it, even though, again, they weren't the best team till the end of the season. Like, famously, it's like the favorite never wins it, and usually the team that did really well at Worlds even bombs it. What's the theory? What would some, like, spitball ideas be as to why this tournament doesn't get dominated by the best Korean
It's team? So easy. The best teams don't care. The best teams go to Worlds, and this year it's different for SKT. I will explain why I do think SKT or Griffin are the favorites this year. But best team go to Worlds. They have an intense year of practice, and then they are forced to play in the Kespa Cup because they're under the Kespa umbrella, and you cannot decline to play, and you just don't give a fuck. Like you had.
Yeah, it's not IEM where every team wants to fucking bow out. Like.
Yeah, like. You're forced to play in Kespa Cup as a Kespa organization. For the lower tier orgs, this is like their chance to be like, oh my god, I can be in the spotlight. We can play versus Faker. Like, we've been waiting all year for this. This is like our first television match, or the only television match we might play in for the entire year. Like, I want to do so well in this. So like for the lower tier orgs, like it's do or die. But for the best orgs, like they don't care.
I think it's a combination of that and also, you know, new rosters being amassed. Obviously, like that can apply pressure to teams to want to perform well. And I think that one of the teams that normally maybe wouldn't approach the Kespa Cup as seriously, that I think will this time, and we're gonna find out in a matter of
9 hours.
Not even. No.
But,
yeah. By the time the second match is right. Yeah, SKT. Like SKT after their abysmal 2018 kind of have to come into this, you know, guns blazing. They have to come out of the gate swinging. They will probably approach this very seriously, whereas any other team who like maybe maintain their roster, such as Griffin, maybe they're going to be a little bit more laid back about it. I think Griffin will still do well because they themselves are like, we feel like we should have been at Worlds. You know, obviously Genji really shit the bed. You know, we should have had that slot. I think that they're also going to be looking to compete, but yeah, it's a combination of we just got this roster together, we're still meshing, and we're still, you know, waiting to kind of find the groove and everything like that, and also just Well, this doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mix of those two. I mean, like you said, Thorn, like a lot of teams have surprised at Kespa Cup, ESC ever. Kongdu Monster had looked good in the past. Like between Kespa Cup and as well as IM Gyeonggi, like sometimes you just get these events that don't mean anything in the grand scheme of the world circuit, and sometimes those upsets happen.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, speaking of SKT though, I have heard as of today that they are hard clapping everybody in scrims.
I will double confirm that SKT has been doing really well in scrims. I heard from a scrim partner. So
they have been dicking on people.
Well, SKT this year are like, they're super hungry because they, as you said, they had a miserable 2018 and they have so much to prove. And everyone that joined SKT, everyone outside of Faker I guess this isn't like too controversial, so I can say everyone outside of Faker, when they joined SKT, they are taking a little bit less, for some players, significantly less than if they played on another team. Everyone joining SKT wants results, and no one really joined for money. And it's not like Faker even stayed for money. Faker is Faker. You have to pay Faker way more than other players just because it's Faker. Like, he's Korean esports in a person. Like, he can get paid so much, so you have to at least like pay him a respectable amount. But everyone else, they took pay cuts to be on SKT, so no one's there to just cash out. They're not there to fuck around. They're there to deliver results.
Sure, and that's basically what KT Rolster was when the roster form was Mad Mod, etc. A lot of those players took pay cuts to join in because they thought that this was going to be the roster that would be able to win Worlds. Obviously, it took them 2 years to be able to get there, and then they did quite well up until a point, and then obviously didn't work out in the end. It wasn't the roster that could win. But it's a similar concept. But I think that honestly, like right now, SKT's roster. I think the only thing that causes failure is if the roster implodes and just kind of turn on each other.
Yeah.
There's just, on paper, it looks so fantastic. It looks so unbeatable, at least within the LCK spectrum. And, maybe China could come in since China's been doing so well lately. But otherwise, like, it just seems like they're going to be untouchable.
I think they have two weaknesses and two core weaknesses. Khan.
Too many cooks.
No. Khan, well, that is the second one I'll talk about. But Khan isn't that great on tanks. There are specific tanks that Khan can do well on. Like, people are going to mention Poppy. People might mention Cho'Gath. But his Sion, a little bit worse. Cho, Poppy, Maokai, Orin, all a little bit worse than his carries. Like, Khan on tanks is definitely not Khan on carries. It's very different. Luckily, the meta is good for them there. Teddy also isn't the monster AD carry he is when he's not playing AD carries. And currently the meta is a lot of non-AD carries bot lane, like Cassiopeia, Karthus, Yasuo. So Teddy and Khan, while I agree with you, they are insane players and they have an argument for being the best in their role in Korea or maybe even the world, but they are a little bit meta dependent. So I think those are the... Go ahead.
They are. I was just gonna say, like, if you need to go for a tank, if that's the draft you want to do, then you probably just sub Khan out and you just go for crazy. And you just throw him on something like the Cho'Gath, like you're talking about. Khan can play a perfectly fine Cho'Gath, but I think that crazy would maybe be a little bit more suited. And that's when you want to transition to, less resource allocation to the top lane. Let's focus on, Faker and Teddy, that kind of thing. But otherwise, like, depending on where the meta's at when the season finally rolls around, if Harry tops back in, which right now we've been seeing a decent mix of it in the Kespa Cup. There's been some taking this, but there's also been the Victor top. There's been the Aatrox is still there. Akali has been a fucking massive pick. If that's going to be in there, then you want Khan in that position.
Yeah, Khan's really good on range carries too, like Victor, Ryze. I know he's infamous for his Chase, but his Ryze and Victor are also crazy. Okay, speaking a little bit about actual Kespa Cup, what do you think about Hwanhwa getting knocked out by an amateur team?
Oh, God. I was surprised, but very joyous, I suppose, at the same time, because I love chaos. I'm the guy who cast the fucking 94-minute game between SK fuck everything. Like if it's on fire, it's great. Is basically how I feel at this point when it comes to League of Legends, and having a team of amateurs who don't even have a coach take down a squad that has a multi-million-dollar company backing it, a chaebol company basically backing it, is just amazing to me, especially given that the team that took him down has Innovation's younger brother on it. That is incredible. That is such a great way to find out who the next, maybe a big team, or maybe not even a big team, but like who the next players are that could be seeping into the challenger scene and into the LCS or LCS, the LCK, to get picked up by squads, to be like maybe subs that will get some play every now and then. Like, I think it's fantastic. For Hanwha, it's absolutely awful. This should never happen.
I called, Doran, if you remember, I called in the Ashley episode. I thought Hanwha did a terrible job with team building, and I fucking hated their roster. So it was hilarious to watch them get knocked out.
I think one of the garbage roster anyway.
Huh?
I think one of the biggest one of the biggest issues is that they pick up Mujin, who looked really good at Worlds, and then they didn't play him at all. They played Bono, who had never won a game at all whenever he was put in, and the only thing that Bono for us in the English cast was good for was making jokes about U2. Like that was it, because we just knew that it wasn't going to yield results. And for whatever reason, they decided to swap the mid lane. They didn't swap the jungle. I don't know if there was something going on with Mujin. Maybe he was feeling under the weather or whatnot, or they felt like they didn't have practice with him at the time, but they didn't put him in. And I felt like if Mujin had played, they probably would have been able to win that series.
Okay. Little bit about, before I ask about SKT and upcoming. Dorian, a little bit off topic, but I have to mention, what do you think about LS coaching BBQ? I know.
Oh, that's not off topic. They're in the Kespa Cup.
Okay.
They're in the same part of the bracket as SKT.
Jesus. I didn't
If they
check
win the first match, they can play SKT.
I didn't check
Yeah, you
for that
idiot.
one.
Damn.
I'm sorry.
All right.
All right, Dorian, so what do you think about BBQ and LS coaching and the Swedish jungler they got? I know you did a video. I didn't get to watch it.
Sure. Well, basically, like a lot of this wasn't in the video. The video was just on the premise that I thought like a very interesting concept was not just that LS got the Swedish jungler into the team, but he also said that he's been pushing BBQ, the organization, to help him set up a foreigner house where Westerners could come and say that, like the people who already go over and stay with LS, like stay in a Goshi hotel or whatever, like the same thing. Like the idea is he wants to make like a more formalized version. So you'd go there and it'd be a whole bunch of you, you'd scrim together, you'd play. Now, he just said it as a way to like practice, And by the way, the reason why LS is bringing that up is, first of all, LS himself benefited from exactly that as a StarCraft player. He actually went over and stayed in what at the time was the GOM house, which was for all the foreigners in StarCraft 2 at the beginning. And this is where actually one of the most famous incidents with LS was where like some guy came and started punching him while he was on stream in this scenario. So LS knows already that like that's in theory a scenario where it'll get a lot more Westerners to try and go to Korea. Whereas if you have to go on your own, and best case scenario, harder, LS helps you, like, it's just way less likely you're not going to enjoy it as much. So even though he didn't allude to the idea that he would then get them into this team, etc., if he is willing to pick up a Swedish player who he thinks has a lot of talent and he can coach, then it does logically follow if some guy went to this foreigner house that doesn't yet exist and was to stay there and practice and show LS that he's really good and show that, he has potential, logically it would follow LS would at least consider maybe this guy could be in my team if it's allowed to have foreigners. And, I just wanted to talk about how cool that potential is because I've always wanted to see some really good Western talent play in the LCK. I think it would be awesome. I think you'd get so many fans from the West tune in just for that storyline.
So after you talk about BBQ, I'll give my 2 cents on that. Or Seth, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say that it's actually really neat to see. Like, it's very rare when you have a player come to Korea and actually compete. Obviously, there's a lot of Western players that compete in StarCraft out here. You have Scarlet. Was it Idra was the original one who actually joined a foreign team. He joined CJ to compete there. It's so very rare that when something like this happens, it draws an immense amount of attention, and you kind of have to just like focus in on this and be like, this is the thing that we need to watch. I did get to speak to Maknoon actually earlier.
Howny.
And I got to speak to Maknoon and I asked him, how are things going with coaching alongside LS and everything like that. And he said that things are going pretty well so far. They have their first match coming up, and that he's really excited to show off what BBQ can be.
What's he gonna say? Like, coaching's going terribly. Like, Koreans will never air out the dirty laundry.
Mock Noon. He's a little more eccentric, I think, but he was a laid back environment. I think he would have been pretty blatantly honest with me. But I now have more faith in BBQ than I did before, which is saying something. Considering that it's
BBQ,
a completely different roster, and it's BBQ, and now they have this really weird coaching staff going on, where it's technically mixed languages and everything like that. But somehow I have more faith in them now than I did before.
Okay, well, Doran didn't touch specifically on this, so I'll give my thoughts. I think LS coaching a Korean team, it's going to be much, much harder for LS than if he was to coach a Western team. Like, as we talked, the whole episode has been about cultural differences between Korean teams and a Western team. And for a Korean to respect a foreigner as their coach itself is going to be really hard. And for LS to coach Koreans itself is going to be really hard. LS is bilingual, knows about league. Even with all that, I think it's going to be, let's say LS coaching is, if you give it a score, it's a 10. If he coaches a Korean team, he can't bring the full 10. It's definitely going to go lower. So, yeah, I have a lot of doubts about it. I have a lot of doubts about the Swedish jungler playing for a Korean roster. I just think there's so many factors that are... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I should put an asterisk. I'd say that I have more faith in BBQ than I did before. But that is comparatively, where BBQ was god-awful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect them to do that much better, but I expect them to do better than they were. I just want to throw that out there. I'm not saying BBQ is going to come back into the LCK and fucking take the whole season.
Yeah, so I have a lot of doubts around BBQ and LS coaching BBQ, not because LS is a bad coach, but because it's just, there's so many factors. This is the first, for a lot of people involved. So, yeah, I'm very tenuous to say, if they'll do well, and it's just going to be incredibly hard for them. It's an uphill battle.
Right, we keep it real on this show. Mm-hmm. At least I do anyway. So I'm not going to hold back on this. Again, Cloud Templar, if you don't like this, hit me up, homie. Let me know where the soju's at. I'm going to say this right now. One thing I'm actually low-key concerned about with this team is, again, this is one of the reasons I agree with you why I think LS would be better suited to coaching a Western team, is because in this particular team, LS is the coach and the authority figure, and they're supposed to respect him, and they're supposed to, again, view him as someone potentially, in an ideal world, maybe like a father figure, someone who you look up to as a role model, etc. A detail a lot of people will not know about Korea is that in Korea, they aren't explicitly, overtly homophobic, but there's a low-key level of that does exist within Korean culture. And I know LS himself has suffered from this in the past. So if you are a coach in that setting, I'm not saying it'll even be in people's minds, but I could imagine there being players who, that means they're not sure about you, or they keep your distance, or they just just out of ignorance, they don't understand that world. And so that is one of those areas where, again, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want. You don't have to wade into the minefield, but I'm just going to be real. That's one low-key reason why I'm a little bit worried for Ellis in that particular sense, because it's just something that's not his fault, but it could go badly in that regard.
So I'll actually comment on this because, I mean, I lived in Dubai, I lived in Yemen, I lived in Saudi Arabia, those places, where they're homophobic, it's execution homophobic. In Korea, in terms of Koreans being homophobic, it's also a matter of being uneducated. You're not taught being gay is normal. You're not taught not majority, but there are tons of people that are gay and that can't come out because of cultural or because of financial or because of job or because of school reasons. But where it's more open in the Western culture, in Korea, that's not open at all. There's one very famous gay celebrity named Hong Seok-chun, and he's
I met him.
He's a accepted gay person, but in Korea, because of army and because of just lack of education, we're Koreans in general and Koreans that don't have a window to the Western world are just not educated about people being gay and that being normal. Some people even view it as a sickness. They're just So yeah, Korea is not very educated in a certain regard. Like Korea used to be a very tiny, small country that got big and that got very technically advanced really quickly. And with that, we still carry a lot of the weight from being a very small country and having very small country point of views. Like, yeah, like I'm someone that grew up in Korea, but that got to experience other cultures and was able to be better educated. For a majority of Koreans, that's not true, and they have a very negative and a very uneducated view of foreigners and of gay people.
Of course. By the way, if anyone hasn't taken this theme, at least from what I've been saying on this episode, just think about this for a moment. I know if you live in America or Europe, right, you are being bombarded by mainstream media that is telling you, like, everything's about race and sexuality and everyone's a fucking bigot and a piece of shit and everyone has to fight for their rights. You know, there are almost no rights that anyone who is like gay or of a different race is fighting for in like major Western countries. They have all the rights already. Like they have literally every single right that every other human being has, except in certain states in America, like gay marriage, you know, isn't on the bills. That's about it. You're still allowed to live your life. People aren't allowed to discriminate against you in your job. What people don't realize is that is just media hype. Like these are actually literally and objectively some of the best countries in the entire world for like race relations, like sexuality being out and not being persecuted. If you don't know that, that's because you haven't looked at the rest of the world. And if you go look at a lot of the rest of the world, that isn't even a topic there because, again, you're not even allowed to discuss these matters. Like, it's not that there aren't any issues in the West. It's that they're overblown. They're magnified up. Hence, if you have one tiny little, like, piece of racism, it will be like a massive story and we'll all be talking about it for a week. That kind of shit could be going on daily in China for all you know. We'll just never hear about it. It's not going to be big news, you know. It's not part of the agenda. So I would just say generally, it's not that those things aren't issues. It's just that you have to understand in a lot of these other countries, they're at least still like low-lying issues or the things that have never been resolved or they're not really part of the discussion, you know. People just live their lives and you just keep it quiet and people just, it's like almost like a don't ask, don't tell thing. They try to just ignore the whole topic entirely, unfortunately. In fact, that's one thing, Loco. Maybe we could touch on this as like as a way to come out the episode. We've done a pretty long episode. Mm-hmm. One other aspect I want to ask you about that ties into this, that again, Westerners will not know, is I noticed another thing, like what you said there, that like they still have that perspective, which was an old school perspective in the West, obviously, that like gay people were like mentally ill, essentially. And they obviously in the West, they even tried some ridiculous treatments to like treat them out of it, which didn't really work. But in Korea,
the gay away camp. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, of course. In Korea, I mean, to be fair, like the vice president of the USA still believes in that. But in Korea, there is actually also generally a problem with all topics to do with mental health. Like actually, one of the areas, I've made this point on other shows before, Loco. One area I actually think people won't know that the West is way ahead of Korea in is the concept of even having a sports psychologist. Like in Korea, I've never even seen a team ever in esports who had a sports psychologist or ever used one.
Or analyst.
I've talked to some players who were Koreans, and when I mentioned it, they literally said, like the ones who knew English and Western culture as well, they said, oh no, that would never be accepted. Because people would think like, what do you mean? Why would I need to talk to a psychologist? Like,
I'm not crazy.
Mental. Like, I haven't got anything wrong with me. It's like, and I'm like, well, no, obviously, you know, we're just talking about helping them with their performance. Like, it is stigmatized there still.
Yeah, like talking to a psychologist in Korea is like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, are you that messed up in the head that you need to talk to a psychologist? Like, are you that crazy? Like, did you?
And then you're like, come on, Saint, give me a fucking break. I'm just trying to make it.
Oh my god!
Just trying to live my life. Oh wait, a Korean one. Yeah, my bad. I got my wires crossed on that one.
Yeah, like, but in Korea, it's like that, where, like, if you have to talk to a psychologist, like Koreans think like you're crazy or there's something wrong with you, like in the head, like. Yeah, like there's a lot of Korean problems that are just being very like kept hidden and like just shoved under the rug, like because we've succeeded so much technologically, financially, but with all that rapid growth, it means like there are some parts that didn't grow with it and that are still being left behind. And I think generally like Korean outlook on like as we mainly talked about foreigners and sexuality and mental health are still years behind Western cultures.
Yeah, like, that's a very good point. Like technology soared in Korea, and obviously like smaller country, better infrastructure. Like it's easier to build things up that way as far as making sure that everything's connected. That's why, you know, when you play in Korea, you get 9 ping because the country's so fucking small. Like you don't have to, the signal doesn't have to bounce that far. And you know, you can get a KTX train to go from Seoul to Busan in 2.5 hours. But when it comes down to basic things that really does lack. Mental health here is a fairly serious issue. I mean, South Korea does have a very
highest suicide
high,
rate for teenagers. Yeah,
they have a huge suicide rate, and that's very unfortunate. And that's one of the things that the country really does need to step up as far as tackling is supporting people and making sure that they can be, feel welcomed into society and whatnot, or reintegrate when they are having issues and stuff. And yeah, like these, coaches like that, like mental coaches and stuff, they don't exist. And I hope that the country can start to transition into a place where mental health is taken more seriously, and that the teams will reflect that by picking up coaches that can work with players on a more personal level as opposed to just within the game.
So they aren't even called mental, like in Korea. So like the professional players will have are mental coaches like that. It's called sports trainer or sports trainer. Like you're called a trainer. You're not called like. There's nothing regarding mentality in it. There's nothing regarding psychology in it. They don't put that in the name. You call it sports trainer. So like he's a sports trainer. Like he teaches you how to be better at sports, where it is fulfilling the job of a sports psych. But you don't use that word in Korea, or it's taboo and it's looked on negatively.
Well, hopefully we could fucking squash that, because it's stupid to have that negative disposition. It's a very serious issue. And memes aside about like saying everything, like it is real, and people need to acknowledge it, because if you just deny it, then it's just going to make matters worse.
You're fighting 50, maybe even 100 years of culture and like riggedness.
It is starting to shift, which is good, especially around, because you bring up sexuality that in Korea, like it is starting to shift, and it's starting to become more widespread is the wrong word, but more common and more accepted, and that's a very good thing. And hopefully society will continue to progress faster. A faster rate would be very good. But it's moving in the right direction. If we could pick up the pace, that'd be fantastic, but otherwise things are progressing along quite nicely. And I hope that continues, and that there's not going to be some random where we go backward, several steps, like electing a Mike Pence in Korea.
Before we take viewer questions, I have to ask one last question. I think Griffin, SKT are the favorites for Kespa Cup, like because of SKT, all the regions we discussed, monster roster, meta on point for them, and they have so much to prove. Same thing for Griffin. Griffin roster was killer last year, and they didn't get to Worlds, so they're so hungry to prove themselves, and beating SKT and winning Kespa Cup would be like a huge mark for them. So those two are my favorites. If I had to pick one, I'll probably go Griffin, because I think Viper is better suited in this meta due to non-AD carries being more meta than AD carries. Dorian and Achilios, what are your predictions for Kespa Cup for favorites?
I think SKT, I'm going to go with that one.
Any reason for
KG's going to take it. Yeah, I would still lean a little bit more towards Telecom. I think that Griffin, I mean, fantastic team. Like I said, I pretty much deserve to be at Worlds over the likes of Gen G. But I think that the one weakness that Griffin still has is Sword. Sword is still a very good player, but I think that he is the weaker link on the team, and I think that with the diversity of Crazy and Khan, SKT could excel a little bit more and control the top lane, where that might be a weak spot for them. It's like, especially if it comes down to a final where it'd be like Griffin versus SK Telecom. I think that SKT would be able to win because of the difference in playstyles that they could integrate just based on those players.
Since it seems like everyone's tired, let's take 2 viewer questions and then we'll end the show. So people in Twitch chat, we are a live show. Ask questions. Don't ask inappropriate questions. We will not take them. Ask 2 questions, mainly for Dorian and Achilios. And if your questions are good, I will ask them your questions. I guess there's a little bit.
Okay. The first thing I saw is I have no questions. Good.
Someone's asking TL super team against SKT super team, but I think we can get better questions.
Does TL have a super team?
Korea has no oil reserves. The president wants to shut down coal plant and not build new, and they will move away from nuclear energy. I will.
Not really a question.
Okay.
Just a weird
That's
statement about the
that's-
political culture.
Okay.
I mean, shutting down coal plants is good. Nuclear energy is clean and probably should be supported. That's my thoughts on the matter, I guess.
Okay. Oh, here's an interesting one. Is the Korean pay cap a real thing? It means like there's a cap that.
Yeah.
You answered, and I'll add on to this.
I honestly, you'll probably have more insights on this. As far as like there being a pay cap, I'm really not sure. I don't necessarily think that there is, or if there is one, then there are probably ways of getting around it and paying your players more. But it just seems like there's just a decent average as far as how players are paid, especially this day and age. Like there have been orgs in the past, going back to like 2016 when I first joined, where players were making a pittance compared to some of the other teams. And I think that the overall pay has come up quite a bit and has kind of hit a pretty decent level. Obviously, I can't speak for every single organization that's in the LCK, especially not Challenger, because God knows. But I think that things are moving along in the right direction. But we've all heard the rumors about how high some of these rates have gone, especially when it comes down to Faker and whatnot. So if the rumors are anywhere near true, it seems like there is no cap. But obviously, Loco, you might have some more insight on this.
So this is actually StarCraft related, and it goes into League of Legends. So I'll actually leak something to you guys. So in StarCraft, pay negotiations were actually super fucking hard to do for players, and all the front offices in Kespa know each other and they talk to each other, so they knew what the top players were getting paid, and they always try to cap it where teams would talk to KT and they would be like, please don't pay Flash more than 300,000, because we're gonna tell Bisu that Flash is making 300,000 and we're never gonna pay Bisu more than that. And our argument to Bisu will always be, Flash is getting paid 300,000. Flash is the best player in the world. You can't be making more than Flash. So all the front offices talked with each other and made sure there was an artificial pay cap by limiting what the highest player could be paid. And in StarCraft 2, it got even worse. So all the front offices talked with each other again, and they're like, we're not going to pay any player above 200,000. The best player will make 200,000, and if anyone wants above that, we're just not going to pay it. So you can't go from SKT to KT to try to make more money. Nope, that's not going to happen. Like, we're going to cap at 200,000, and we're not going to compete with each other.
I have an angle on this one, by the way. Are you still going?
Yeah, let me finish with League of Legends, and then go ahead. So in League of Legends, they also did the same thing, and that's where the big Samsung breakup happened, where Samsung was like, we're only going to pay this amount, and we're not going to go over, and they already talked with the other team, so they would not pay over that. And then something very interesting happened where Korea never had to deal with before. Esports became big in other countries like China, USA, and Europe, and these regions are willing to pay more. So the artificial pay cap between the Korean organizations broke, because now players, you're only gonna pay me that much, I'm going to China. You're only gonna pay me that much, I'm going to NA. You're only gonna pay me that much, I'm going to Europe. So there was an artificial pay cap during the StarCraft era and the StarCraft 2 era and the early League of Legends era, but when China and North America started to shell out more than the Korean orgs, the artificial pay cap broke. Doran, go ahead.
Right, the main problem here people need to understand is that, okay, in the Western scene, we didn't have any cooperation from anyone. So tournament organizers like DreamHack, IEM, they're battling each other. Now, in the theory, great. That means that IEM and DreamHack are trying to like raise the prize pool as high as they can, and they're trying to have a better event than the other guy, and they're always trying to one-up each other. It's like the theory of what people think like free market capitalism is. Like, in theory, competition's going to be, it's actually good that they act selfishly, because the people who win are like the viewers and the people who play in the tournament, etc. Same thing with teams. Teams are all fucking each other. Like, if I can pay more and get your star player, of course I do it instantly, because I'm going to beat your team then. Same scenario. If teams competing, who does that help? It helps the players, because the players get a higher pay salary. Players are all competing against each other. I don't know how much you make. You don't know how much I make. It depends on who I know and what teams offers to me. So I might play my hand smarter than you and get a better team. You might be better than me, but not get the right deal, you know. in that scenario, it's very easy in the West to see that there's not that many initial problems because nobody's exploiting this system. The problem is what we're moving towards in esports is a totally open scene of hobbyists like that to real sports. And in real sports, every single layer of those 3 layers I gave you in the hierarchy, the people who run and own the leagues, the people who have the teams, and the players who play for the teams, is represented with a form of union or association. So usually there's only one league anyway, and the league has total power, so they don't need to make an agreement with anyone. Then you could have a sport like the ATP, for example, where you have different tournaments and they all agree to work together. You could have the teams. So in the NFL or whatever, it's franchise. The teams all work together. In fact, they literally profit from each other because the NFL making money means we all get our share. So again, we're not actually all against each other. We're against each other on the field. Outside of the field, we're actually business partners. That's why Riot calls it the Permanent Partnership Program. The problem is this. In all the sports, the players have a union. And the reason the players are able to get their salary cap raised as the revenue of the league goes up is every time the collective bargaining agreement comes up and it hasn't been renewed, they have either a lockout or they get their terms agreed to. So what they do is they go to the owners and they say, right, we want 1% more of the revenue, which by the way, in the NFL could be millions and millions. And we're going to fight for this because we know for the next 4 years, 5 years it might be, we're all going to be stuck at this pay cap. So it's worth actually us even saying, we'll delay the season. We won't even play now unless we start. Now, anyone who's been following the analogy so far can see that the big problem is in the West, we're only just getting all of those factions in place. But in Korea, the problem is Korea and China were way ahead of the West in this respect because almost from day one, the tournaments worked together through Kespa because Kespa had to grant the licenses and who does it that way. The teams are part of Kespa, they're head people, so they all work together again. No player union exists. There's nothing for the players. They cannot push back on this. If you don't want to be in SK Telecom and follow these rules, get the fuck out. There's 100 other people I can bring in right now. So the player basically is the one who got squeezed by the leverage when it was a Korean ecosystem, like a closed system completely. And as you're saying here, there were literally cartels, which, by the way, has existed in Western esports. I'll give you an example. I used to work for a big name team in the West about 10 years ago, and they actually had, the game was World of Warcraft. You know when they used to have WoW Arena 3v3? Yeah. In fact, you probably know the streamer Hafu. She used to play in some of these teams. Mm-hmm. When they had WoW Arena, this was actually the esport that had the highest viewing figures in the world because Blizzard would sometimes embed it in the client. And plus it's World of Warcraft. A million bazillion people play it, and so some people are going to watch just for novelty. Even though it had way higher viewing figures than like Counter-Strike and Warcraft and all the other games, they used to get paid zero salary because all the cartel people, that what happened is the teams came together, the esports teams, and made a cartel and said behind closed doors, if we all agree not to pay any salary or a very low salary, then we will all collectively not have to pay them much. And since these are people who they're already top level players and they're making a lot of prize money from the circuit, they'll all agree to it as long as we all agree to do it. And so even though those people by market value, if people had been competing properly, selfishly as orgs, would have made really good money. They would have made the best salary in esports. They were making almost nothing. So you can see how in Korea, when it was a closed system, they could run this game all day long. And as a result, like you're saying, people think of the Samsung players. These were people who were having top finishes every split, and they were making way less than a mid-tier NALCS team of players who nobody even gives a fuck about. But as you say, what has opened it up, even though we don't currently have any player representation to battle back from that angle, at the moment what's opened it up is why should a Korean org want to work with SK Telecom to make their price the same? No, I benefit as a Chinese org rather. If I'm a Chinese org, if I'm Vici Gaming, of course I'm going to offer more than SK Telecom because I want their fucking players. So actually, as much as everyone blames the Korean exodus, because it did reduce Korea's stock in terms of number of good players in Korean teams, it made the conditions for the players way better. Way better. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't surprise me at all, unfortunately, that sort of a cap thing exists. By the way, again, just to tie it into this to finish up, it's also kind of a Korean mentality. Like when Seth said earlier about how one of those companies, Hanwha, is part of a chaebol. The chaebol basically is a massive multinational company. Well, it's a national company in this sense. It's a massive company that's run by a family, or at least historically was run by a family. So as a result, the cousins in fucking accounting, and then the guy who's the marketing directors, your brother or something. And famously, these chaebols actually act a bit like sort of like the feudal houses of like medieval Europe and like intermarry with each other. And, you know, when you get some like new guy raises up, actually, he's like the fucking cousin of the guy who's in the other chaebol. So the problem is they're already used to that scenario where there's only a few companies at the top that run everything. So of course they all agree on shit and make things work to their benefit. Why wouldn't they? It's in their interest to do it. You know, to them, it's not even a weird thing. That's just the way the world is.
Way of life. Yeah.
It's the same way like in America, like if you have like 4 entertainment companies that basically own
media
like,
is very similar in America.
Like Viacom is like, you know, like one of the ones that like own most stuff, and then it kind of like boils down and everything like that. Like that's basically what chaebol companies are.
Yes.
So you have, you know, like CJ is a chaebol company.
Except for theirs, it's like everything's run that way. You know, it's like, yeah, as you're saying, for media companies is very famous. That's the thing in America. But it's like if everything in America was like 6 companies.
But these companies are like, you know, very, very successful, especially because like post-war, these were the companies that really helped rebuild Korea and get them back on track, and then, you know, up the infrastructure and everything like that in the country that made South Korea back to a first world country, and then now one of the leaders in technology and everything like that. So they do have a lot of control in that regard. So, but yeah, like they bounce around, they communicate with each other all the goddamn time.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, think about this. If you want to see how different Korea's mentality for certain business things and what's like moral is. So in the West, we all understand the concept of conflict of interest. Like it should, like, I'll give you a great example. Riot, in theory, would never allow me to own TSM and then play for Team Liquid at the same time, and then have like my brother be like the owner of another team. And, you know, like that's all, it's so obvious, the conflict of interest, that we could like abuse our relationships and like literally rig games. That is not even, this is all you need to know to realize how different it is in Korea. CJ Entus, the company, simultaneously had a team in OGN and owned OGN at the same time. And nobody even batted an eyelid. They were like, well, obviously, it's CJ. It's like, no one even, to this day, no one even thinks that's fucked up. It's only Riot probably cares. That's one of the reasons, I assume, by the way, a low-key reason no one ever brings up as to why Riot also didn't want OGN to run LCK anymore.
Imagine Riot had a team called, let's not call it Team Riot, let's call it Team Brendan Beck. And they competed in the LCS. That's the equivalent of what was happening in Korea. CJ owns OGN and had a team called CJ. Actually, it would be like a Team Riot participating in NALCS. It would literally be that. Team Riot participating in NALCS, where the team is owned by Riot and ran by Riot and also runs NALCS. That was the equivalent. Final question for Seth, and then let's end the show. So
I have one from a long time ago.
Go ahead.
Answer it. So Sloth221 asked me, will Achillios be casting LCK in 2019?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be stepping away from League of Legends, guys. This is the first time I'm talking about this publicly. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this today, but the question came up, so I might as well do it. I am going to be disconnected from League of Legends. I'm going to be focusing on things like Overwatch and whatnot. So this is kind of like, hopefully not my final piece of League involved content goes. Obviously, I'd love to be back on the show sometime. I'm going to be watching it very closely for the season and whatnot, but I'm going to be shifting over to other titles.
Okay. What is it? Well, if you keep watching League of Legends, we'll be more than happy to invite you on the show. Do you want to maybe tell people your Twitter or your Twitch where people can find you?
Sure. If you want to come follow me for non-League of Legends content, like I said, I'll be watching the game chat. I'll be modding it and all that kind of stuff and meeting with you guys, posting Pepe's and all that bullshit. But my Twitter is Achillios, @AchilliosCast, as it says under my little webcam thing there. Thank you.
Well, definitely don't do that. Don't post any Pepe's, because you might want to get into the Overwatch League someday. So
that's true. That would
never Pepe's.
Right. No,
just
not
post,
Pepe's.
Yeah, other one.
Okay.
You know,
a lot of Pog champs and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But,
yes.
Otherwise, my Twitch is just twitch.tv/Achillios. I stream every now and then. Don't sub to me because you won't get your money's worth. And that's about it.
Okay. Dorian, any final thoughts before closing out the episode?
Nah, thought I did a pretty good job. Fuck everyone.
Okay. Well,
whatever. Just got to end it for it. Cut the VOD at that point. Just cut it on that.
Okay. I'll make sure the editor make sure you cut the VOD where Doran said, this isn't going to be part of the.
Don't do it before. Do it after I said it.
After he said. But I mean, my thoughts like post episode. I'm actually really glad that we got to do an episode that wasn't like 100% focused just on League of Legends, and also about living in Korea and a lot of like issues and a lot of interesting topics around League of Legends. I think
talking about mental illness, like social acceptance.
Fine, because I think these are like very, very like huge topics that are part of everyone's life in League of Legends and also outside of League of Legends. But people can't talk about that on a Riot show. I mean, what's Cutie and Scar's show, like Beyond the Rift? I don't think this is something like they also would want to tackle either, like Asians being homophobic or like mental illness or like just these like kind of rough topics. And I'm really glad like we were able to be a platform and actually like talk about these topics while stepping around the minefield for some of us, and for people like Doran just like just going fucking ham on it.
Mine's can't hurt me, right? Mine's can't hurt me.
Okay, like, does OGN or like Riot or whoever you work for like tell you not to talk about these things publicly? By the way, Seth, or like, is this something like as caster like you try to not talk about?
Really. I mean, like, when you're directly involved in something, obviously, like stir up controversy, like you should avoid it. But and I'll still be working with OGN in 2019 and everything like that. Like, you know, I'll be doing other titles and stuff for them, like on a semi-regular basis. But no, like I've never had any what to say and what not to say when it comes down to like casting and things otherwise, at least from Riot's perspective. I got in trouble one time for saying shit on a broadcast, I guess. But outside of that, like no communication whatsoever. But you know, it's kind of it's a little bit of common sense, I guess. You know, like you don't want to overstep your bounds. You don't want to take something too far, and you want to keep some things under wraps, I suppose. But I don't think anything that we discussed today would, even if I was still going to be actively casting League of Legends, I don't think anything that we discussed today would even come close to being questionable in their eyes anyway.
Okay.